Testing. Okay, good evening, everybody. It is 5:31 p.m. on Wednesday, April 15th, and we're going to get this workshop started. And we will start with introductions with Councilor Harriman.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Julia Harper, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Luke Jensen at large.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Puckett, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you. So I did just hear a note. We do normally start meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, but I am persuaded by my parliamentarian here, Member Jensen, that this was noticed as a workshop and we'll treat it as a workshop. And we don't necessarily start workshops with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I think that is fair enough. And so we'll get into our planned content for the workshop, which is to discuss the budget. And for that, I will turn it over to the superintendent.
So continuing in the process, we are looking at the ways in which we can frame this visually so that there's opportunities for input. Just 1 second, I have an echo. Austin, are you hearing an echo? Might be better now. Okay. So the goal tonight to look is to continue to look at options, assess new information, and looking for your feedback and working towards consensus, at least at a minimum at a budget amount, something that folks feel comfortable supporting to point us in a direction. As you know, this conversation is very live. Things seem to get modified throughout each day. I spent time on the phone this afternoon talking about the estimated amount of our bridge supplemental, which is very much an estimate built off of a handout that I got while sitting in a session of projected numbers. But I need you to note that, I need to note that this is not allocated yet. This is not necessarily all the process is done in a way that I have the number that I know will result in additional subsidy to Lewiston, but I am trying to just project with what information I do have. But new information, some of this is a recap, some of it's an update. So the recap is the facilities projects that would defer of $111,000, nutrition reduction of $100,000, and JROTC correction of $72,661. But we did get our health insurance number. And a reminder to all those listening, we budgeted 15% for an increase in our health insurance because other districts near us last year did face that kind of increase. And the projections this year were very much unknown. It did come in at a rate of 7.35%. Last time we met, we had a cap number and you saw a reduction of over $400,000. This is not in addition to that. This is the total of the reduction. So the total reduction from what we budgeted to what the actual projection is $1,010,000. It's a significant savings. And so the items from there up are reductions in expenditures. So those are things that are in your binder that we behind the scenes are plucking out to get to what the expenditure and budget is. The last item there, the state bridge supplemental, that would act as additional revenue. The Education and Cultural Affairs Committee did vote to support this. It did make its way through some appropriations conversations and believe it was passed in the supplemental budget. But there's still, until we have it certified, I want to make sure that we're talking about that number as my best estimate and not as something that is going to show up in the mail next week. But with the reductions in things that are being expended and the new dollars, the best estimate that we have, that totals $1.794 million. We do continue to pursue alternatives to the high cost quote that we have for workman's comp. That may not have traction in time for the budget process, but I need you to know that we're going to continue to pursue that. Our current workman's comp contract sunsets unless we renew at the end of the calendar year. So we're still very much looking at options. We have been in communication with city about what options might exist there. So state funding, a couple of members brought up that that we do have an increase in our budget, and it's not small. I'm very aware of that. But we also have an increase in state funding, and part of that is the effort to expand some of our programming and additional ways that we get subsidy through our enrollments and the services that we provide. So just wanted to take a snapshot to remind people that just under 70% of our budget is funded entirely by state subsidy. So we're not going to the immediate local community to say, this is your taxes. I'm not naive. We all spend our money. We all contribute to the tax base throughout the state and elsewhere. But I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that amount. I added the state bridge supplemental, which again is the bridge funds that are still being carved out. The bridge language is because there was a change to the funding formula that will take effect in the following fiscal year. So in an attempt to help districts get from where we are today to that following fiscal year, that's what that bridge supplemental fund is intended to do. And I have there that this represents 68.8% of the proposed budget. We also heard from a few people talk about fixed costs. And so just wanted to bring up some things. This isn't a comprehensive list, but just wanted to make note. We are a large organization. We do have a lot of students enrolled, but we also operate under collective bargaining agreements. And so these are all available on our webpage, but we have one for administrators, one for certified professional educators, that's teachers and others, ed techs, our food service folks in a couple of different areas. Our general government, that's more some custodial and some also clerical folks. We have school operations and teaching learning personnel policies. We have tech support and systems administrator, CBA. Our CLIMB program has a different kind of agreement because they work year round, and in discussions that was fundamentally different enough to have their own grouping. And I know you all know this, but just for those who might be consuming this online or after the fact, the negotiated contracts related benefits, they really are fixed costs to us. And the only way to reduce those fixed costs is to reduce the number of people that serve in those capacities. And similar to the state funding, our staff represents 70% of the proposed budget, which is roughly $90 million. Other costs, as you can see and we've discussed, they start to get on the fringe of what's considered a fixed versus a variable or fixed with variables. But transportation, as you know, new contract and an increase in cost there. Nutrition has its cost, but it's something that we work hard for reimbursement for. And I don't have to go through the whole list, but between our obligations and the things that we need to do day to day to function as a school system, there's a lot of them, and it's not inexpensive. Many members of the committee wanted to see something similar to what we've done in the past is a side-by-side comparison document. So we've shared that, it's out there. But I want to talk to you about it in a way that we structured it as, option A, B, C. They're not prioritized, they're not ranked, but they do go from the most reductions in category A, less in B, less in C. They're not a directive. They're interchangeable. You could move things around. If this is a format that you want to work off of, we can certainly do that. I, of course, do have concerns about certain reductions diminishing our capacity that could create what I think are unnecessary risks or reduce our ability to carry out that effort to a point that it could be dysfunctional. So we want to have a chance to review potential reductions as we move forward. So I'm just jumping to the link that's there and zoom this in a little bit. Do we have it all? Almost. So some language here at the beginning that I discussed already, and just the follow-up items that you can see that, again, we mentioned in the slides, and including the bridge year funding, the insurance rate, some things that we would prefer not to do, at least based on past conversations. We prefer not to reduce after-school activities and summer program reductions, but that's not a rule. That's just that seemed to be in the air over the last conversations. There's also been conversations in the community, and since this was put together and shared with you, there have been some additional meetings and information, but there's still some conversations at the city level that are discussing a phase-in approach potentially. They're also discussing some live numbers as reductions are made as to what the calculation for the tax rate would be if we were at this place as a collective. But we still have some unknowns when we look at the adjusted values to homes. And at the end of this document, I'll do my best to explain when we get there again, but we tried to take former tax rate and make a comparison, but that comparison can get confusing in a hurry because we don't know the value of said home. And so that work continues to happen. And if anybody has additional information, we'll continue to adapt. But we want to at least put something in front of you similar to what we've looked at in the past for thinking purposes. One thing that came up was that in our last meeting, we talked about potential reductions in some categories, but what I didn't do, which maybe would have been helpful for you, and I apologize if that's the case, was put in all of the reductions in those categories, because once we created those categories, I decided to only share and create discussion or hope to create discussion around items that I thought were of interest to you, and I excluded items that were not seemingly something that people wanted to fight for in the budget, and that included some of the items you see in the Dingley and administrative cuts. So I think it created some questions in the community and amongst members that those things were put back in somehow. But what happened was I didn't put them in the presentation because I felt just kind of reading the room that these things weren't areas of focus for discussion for putting them back in the budget, if you will. So those items were reduced at the beginning. They remain reduced in your budget. They're already pulled out of your binder, if you will. And I did include the tech integrator positions, coach positions there. They do work in different places in our district, but they are working in schools. The coach positions and the specialist operates out of Dingley. So that's where I put it. But when you look at that list, just for those out there who say, you think you need to cut more, at Dingley or in administration or Dingley office related things, there's already reductions pulled from your binder that total over $1 million.
Member Glant.
Yes, the nutrition reduction, I'm sure I haven't looked it up. I've just noticed it right now. Could you tell me what that's about?
We had put in a placeholder when we first started the budget many months ago because we were looking at reimbursement cycles and thinking that we may need additional funds locally to pay for certain levels of nutrition and what we provide. that exceeds our reimbursement from federal government. What we have found through the reimbursement process is that those funds were not needed, so we have pulled them out. So those funds are coming out of the budget. So as we look at A, B, and C below, again, A represents the largest reduction, B is less than A, C is the smallest, at least on this sheet. But you're not bound to these options. There can certainly be a lot of discussion about what things should or should not be here. So from a how it's built perspective, everything in option A are things that you've seen on that reductions list that was shared with you a few weeks back. And then option B, it's the same listing, but if we put it back in the budget, we left it blank. But it gives you a comparison moving across. So the first example of that is the first item, the gen ed social worker. So in option A, if you can see it, it's in. When you get to option C, it's not there. It means, excuse me, if you see it, it's reduced. When you get to option C, it's not there. It means it's not being reduced. Is it, I'm trying to not be confusing as best of my ability.
Member Glenn.
Yes, so when I see in A, librarian LMS, and B, librarian LMS, that means it's being taken out of both A and B.
Right. So if you see it in that option, it's being reduced. If you no longer see it, it's included
Back in.
to go back in the budget.
Thank you.
Yep. And so I don't, is it okay if I kind of scan over this and then we can come back and discuss it a little further? Some caveats here at the bottom. When we get to the lower section, there's some italics. And the items in italics are, I wanted you to think of those things as separate from the position conversation. But these are either things that we have found that we can pull, things that we've looked at accruals and we can pull out, or additional revenue, which again offsets your expenditure total. Below that, you can see the total reduction in each proposed A, B, or C. And you can also see what it reduces the local increase by. Increase over last year, it shows you both a number in dollars and the percent as it relates to the difference between last year and this year. And really what we're focusing on is local dollars. So much of this conversation can get big when we talk about the whole, but what people vote on in Lewiston at the referendum is the local ask of taxpayers through property taxes. So other dollars, they're not irrelevant, but they're not being voted on. Lewiston folks who go to the ballot box to vote on May 12th will only be voting on these bottom numbers of this table or whatever you land at for the articles that get voted on. So our budget, while it exceeds $130 million, about 90 million of that is state subsidy, and the rest of it is the ask locally, which again, respectively is 33.6, 33.9, 35.1. And whatever changes you make in and out, we'll do that here. I also want to note that to try to limit confusion, if you remember back, there was a section of additions that we had talked about. Those are left out of this conversation, but whatever decisions the school committee makes, I can reconcile those and we can talk about them as appropriate. But I want to make sure that you know that they're not on this list, so we're not doing the back and forth. But they still live kind of on the side burner. And I think once we get through some direction on this, I can share more detail on what additions I think we could reduce or what I think we should keep based on what we've discussed as a leadership team. But I left them off of this to not create confusion intentionally. At the very bottom here, this is the chart I was referencing that is harder to follow in one sense. And that sense is we do not know what the valuation of said home would be. And so if you were looking at option A, just to give you a frame of reference, I'm thinking about approving option A, B, or C. Option A would be a $33.6 million ask of local taxpayers in total. The impact on a $150,000 home I use the old mill rate of 1962 because it sounds like the city's working that down, maybe even to the 18 range. But whatever that mill rate becomes, we can do the math on the cost of a home. So using the 1962, which is what we had available before the city meeting recently, if you do the math, it shows you what the taxes would be under each of those options based on the mill rate and the home value as far as school-specific cost. The last row is a comparison to what that home would have paid last year. But here's the big difference. The home that was $150,000 last year will likely not be valued at $150,000 this year. So I put the table together as a reference, but I wanted you to have the caveats that that $150,000 home last year could be worth 3 this year in this new valuation. I don't know. If that's the case, that 1149 in essence could be doubled. It's not exact. These are estimates, but that could be doubled if that's the case for that home.
Just to clarify, what those numbers are showing with those caveats still in place, that's just the school portion. It's not the entire local ask.
Correct. We calculated the school portion if those were the factors.
Thank you. Member Hurd.
Thank you. So, I have a question about the SEL coaches and new positions that you were talking about at the beginning of our budget meetings. Is that something you're still looking at? Have you?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
We are still looking at it. So all those other things that were additions, I omitted them from this presentation to try to not create confusion. But I want to also be transparent up front that those still live in your binder as additions.
So then I guess I'm
The math
confused.
still plays out, but the position wise, instead of doing subtractions and additions in front of you on screen, I wanted to have that caveat there. And for example, if you decide we're not cutting technology, I'm going to go into the additions and recommend to the committee that we don't add that innovative position. Because that was put there to try to have some semblance of carryover if we reduce all of those roles.
So then I guess the question is, if those are already in our budget, yes, those new positions are already.
Those do live in your binder at this
Okay.
moment.
So then, but then you have 2 lines here for an SEL coach for Geiger and an SEL coach for Farwell. Wouldn't those new positions be in replace of those positions?
So these are only the reductions that are pulled from the binder.
But do you see where I'm like?
I do, but I was trying to avoid this confusion by not moving back and forth.
We're confused.
I don't know how it's confusing. The additions still live elsewhere. These are just reductions.
But they're not reductions in option C. And some in option B.
So if you choose not to reduce these items, so say you say do not reduce the SEL coach at Geiger and at Farwell out of the local budget, then we are going to have to, then we as a team will go back and say, so we will then need to do something different with that money, whether it's take it out, whether it's do something different with it, but if these items are not reduced, then we still have those placeholder positions in our budget. So when you tell us what you want us to cut or not cut, then we'll have to go back and adjust the budget to match what it is that you're telling us not to cut.
And those are all known. Those are all known. We could put them on a screen right now, show you. If you want to do the math tonight, we can. We have the ability to do that. This really isn't confusing. These are reductions, but we do have potential additions that we've considered that we think are necessary.
Okay, Member Bowden.
Okay. Let me just ask this a different way. So I'm going to use the coach example, okay? Since you just used it, the SEL coach at Geiger, the SEL coach at Farwell. So if we decide that we want to cut those positions as a committee, but we don't want it restructured into something else, we don't have that option because if we cut them, they're being restructured. Is that what you're saying? No, that's what
You have
I'm
every,
confused.
the school committee's version of the budget has every option available. Last time I presented both in the same set of slides and it created confusion. So this time I separated them. I don't know why there's confusion. Personally, I don't know if I could say it differently. The school committee has 100% authority on all the things in and out of this budget. If we were trying to say that something couldn't be moved, I apologize. That's not my intention. These are straight reductions, this whole list in an effort to not create confusion.
Can I put it another way as well? So option A, and please correct me if I'm wrong, option A is basically the superintendent's budget as proposed, right? All the reductions, so we got this sheet a little while ago, right? It has all the reductions on one side and all the replacement, that's not the right word, but all the additions on the other side. So option A is this, basically. What this chart is showing, which is some potential kind of starting points, right? Is let's say if the committee decided to go for option C, just as it is, meaning we're keeping, you know, the gen ed social worker at Montella, the students at Montella, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The replacement additions, right, that were in the superintendent's budget, those wouldn't be relevant anymore, potentially. And so that it is a trade there, but it doesn't really make sense to list all of them on one table because they're not moving in the same direction financially, right? But I don't think so. There could be an option D that says do everything in option A, all those reductions, plus do not make those additions, right? Which might be what you're getting at potentially. I'm not sure. Not that you're proposing that, but maybe. But just to say, you know, everything is still on the table, including, you know, all the reductions listed, the additions listed separately, other things that aren't mentioned at all, right? Does that make some sense? Yeah. Remember?
So, the way I'm thinking of it in my brain is you had already, those 5 positions that we're restructuring or potentially reclassifying or whatever we're doing with those to replace the quote unquote SEL coach positions, because they haven't been posted, because they haven't been hired, because we don't know what step they're on, because all of those things. So in my mind, I'm thinking we have no idea what the cost is per employee for those positions, but yet we're putting a number. So that's all I'm saying. Like, I'm just like, is this a true depiction of like an actual number if we're going to potentially create positions that we have no idea what that actual number is?
So we do this every year. We look at a balance of our actuals and the contracts, and we choose numbers that are informed, but we do choose numbers that are based on essentially median, because we might hire someone with less years who is less expensive. We might hire someone who doesn't take insurance, so that's less expensive. And we could hire someone top of scale taking benefits, which is more expensive. That's why we don't use the bottom or the top. But we've been able to successfully budget using that number each year for different roles that we have.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Member Glant.
Yeah, I have a question on the last page. And maybe it's just my understanding. Even though A is the deepest cuts, maybe I just need to talk this through so I understand it. Okay, and the taxpayers are going to pay less. Okay, I think I've talked myself through it. I understand it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I see, you know, I should have mentioned, I do see a couple more hands, but I just want to clarify, were you done with your presentation of this?
Yeah, and I just want to add to, I think we're at a point though, with the amount of data we've shared and the amount of information we've shared, we can move pretty quickly on the fly. So if someone has a question that says, okay, I get what you're trying to do with the SEL thing. The other role is fundamentally different enough that it has to be posted, change the job description, what have you, create some balance around the district. Jake, I get what you're trying to do. And the numbers exist the way we budget. Having said that, if you wanted to say, keep those reductions, my pitch to you would be to put those 5 in. You still get that choice. If you pitch, don't cut those positions, I'm going to come back to you and say, if you don't cut those, we don't need 5 of these. We might need 3. I might recommend 3. You might choose to do none. But that's why I was talking about like the ins and the outs of these pieces. But the pitch for that particular role is not to take it out and just put it back in. It was to consider if we're taking out that and another role, we need a different role that tries to hold all of these baskets. And that was the idea behind the kind of the add back. So I just want to be clear with people that role would fundamentally shift and have a different job description.
Okay.
But it is dependent upon other decisions.
Right. Member Harper and then Counselor Hammond.
Thank you. Just a couple clarifying questions for now. So again, what's not represented here, along with the proposed additions, is the sunsetting grant funded positions. Yep.
Correct. And I think that's a great example that, like, let's say that the committee wanted to add those back in. We provided what those positions are, what they cost, and what it would cost to keep them in the budget. So we have the ability to go to the different sheets and grab that number for you, and we can, if we have a couple seconds, we can adjust this accordingly.
Did you have another question?
Yeah. So I know there was other discussion about potentially looking at different places for cuts. And what you've brought back is essentially the same superintendent's budget. I'm trying to understand, just like I can, if I'm putting myself in your shoes and basically how you've presented this and not looking at the proposed additions is sort of like wanting more feedback on these current positions before potentially going back and making tinkering and tweaks in other places. Does that feel accurate of what you're going for?
Yes and no. The reality is the school committee tonight could decide to put all the sunset positions back in here, cut the first third, plug in some position we've never discussed. Like, the committee has a lot of autonomy right now. But I will say it's been a challenge, at least for us and our team, is we've heard, it feels more and more like 6 to 8 different types of scenarios and positional inputs. And we have this tax burden piece that we can't put our finger on. No one here is fault. But I think without that information, it's harder to do this work, but we still have a timeline. And so I would say that when we talk about, if you look at the top of this screen that I'm sharing, all those tabs are different spreadsheets of data that we've shared with you. And we are prepared to jump to whatever we need to that exists in documentation, that if the will of the committee is we really want to put these things back in and we want to preserve those, we can almost live rebuild this sheet to have an option D or a different spreadsheet altogether. So you could start seeing how that lays out.
Counselor Hammond.
Thank you. I've got a clarifying question on this. So it's on this document, page 6, sort of at the bottom line there where it says total ask of local taxpayers. So I get what you're doing with not having the additions on this document with the potential subtractions. Are those additions included in that bottom line, the total ask, or are they not included?
They are included. So those numbers are inclusive of everything we presented to you to the moment,
Okay.
including those revenue differences.
And then to follow up on that, are the additions that are included in that bottom line different across the 3 scenarios? Do they respond to the different positions that are proposed to be cut, or is it the same amount in each of those scenarios? I guess, like if, on the left-hand column where we're cutting the most positions, we would probably want to add the most back in from the additions list. Is the middle column a shorter list of additions and then
So
later on?
the additions are not on this list at all. They are included in the total because so we're using the real number. I think what I'm trying to do is get to a place of, depending on the decisions made, the librarian's a good one. You see middle school and high school on here. Should you choose to reduce those, I'm then going to bring to you the pitch of the addition of having at least one person to facilitate that effort and adding an ed tech so that we could still have a library that is functioning, not at the same capacity with the same expertise, but is functioning. So what you don't see on this list is that ed tech or that district librarian role, or that 7 through 12 role. So that was intentional in that if you decide, no, we're preserving the library, what I'm going to do is then remind you that the positions in the additions line that would then focus on library are either not needed or you want to add capacity. But I'm going to be very upfront with what's there. But this particular listing does not have the additions. Those are on your separate sheet.
So I guess to follow up on that, if we say we agreed on option C, for example, would that bottom line, that total ask of local taxpayers likely go down because we wouldn't need some of the proposed additions back in?
So yes, the way you frame that question, absolutely. So right now, the additions are included in that subtotal at the very bottom there, the total ask of taxpayers. If you made decisions to keep some of those, anything that you keep is going to increase that bottom line. But if you make certain decisions like the librarians, it will go up by the amount of those librarians, but I'm going to then, we would then have to subtract those additional figures because they are part of the total.
Member Bowden and then Member Jensen.
Sorry, just one clarifying question then. So you were saying, I just want to make sure I have this straight. The $809,000 addition amount you put into each of those totals.
Correct. It is included in the totals. There's no additional add to those. It needed to be in the totals for you to know what number you were working off of.
Okay.
So that it is inclusive of the additions, which again, those are in your binders. Those are part of your totals as we sit today.
Yeah, the same across the board, regardless of what positions are there or cut. The 809,000 was added in to option A, to option B, and option C at the bottom.
That's correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I spoke with someone who, we received a lot of feedback from the public and staff members, and not all of it has entered the conversation that we've been having. And so I was just asked if I could maybe read some of the suggestions that were made, and these are not my thoughts, not everything I necessarily agree with, but I'm just going to go through the list here pretty quickly, just as part of, I guess, the conversation here. So one option I heard was to cut district level curriculum staff and have the duties absorbed by school level coaches or vice versa. More shared schools for coaching roles if reductions are made, possible stipends for grade team leaders to take on responsibilities of possibly cut coaches, keeping social workers, moving into the local budget if necessary, moving from an SEL coaching model to a more social worker practitioner model, restructuring the district's coaching model and moving oversight responsibilities to the assistant superintendent, eliminating an assistant director position, and then having stipends for special ed teaching positions in exchange for eliminating the vacant roles. And I guess before I go through the list of things that I'd like to cover right now, I would ask if we could maybe have like a parking lot. I think it would really help us if we kind of mention the things that stand out to us and what we want to maybe have a possible thumbs up or thumbs down on. My previous stint on the school committee, that's typically how we did the budgets, and it tended to move things along pretty quickly, especially at the last couple of meetings before we voted on the budget itself.
If I could just speak to that, yeah, I think that is good. And we did kind of loosely add things to a parking lot. And I do think a couple of the superintendent's other slides touch on some of those that hopefully we can get to in a little bit. But yeah, please continue with your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just, first thing I want to say before I kind of go through like my comments on the specifics of the budget, I really don't think this is going to pass on the first vote. The public kind of views our city government, us together with the city government, as a Leviathan that they are just not happy with. And based on some of the people I've heard from, I really don't think this is going to pass the first vote. So I'm very hesitant to make extensive cuts, knowing that we may be expected to make further cuts down the road. And as I've said before, I want to approach the budget in that we meet a minimum safety standard, not just physical safety, but also like mental health stress-wise for both staff and students in the district. That's the approach that I'm kind of taking in the budget here. Of course, I'm willing to compromise and find an amount that works because I pay rent in the city and it absolutely goes, when the taxes go up, it does go into my rent. People make passive money from being landlords these days, and it goes on to the tenants. And, I can think of my own grandmother, 85 years old, and, she's on a fixed income, and a huge tax increase is going to be pretty tough. That being said, I do think that we could make some other cuts to, I guess, like central office. And I can elaborate on more on that in a second here. This is not really in any specific order, and I apologize. So my approach again should be to maintain the minimum standard of safety, then focus on academics, and then focus on the culture of the schools and the school district itself, which to me would include the athletics program and the extracurriculars, which do make up more than 1.7 million. And so kind of my approach here is if we need to eventually make cuts, that is, possibly if this gets voted down the first vote and the public wants us to make cuts, to me, that's entirely on the chopping block, the athletics and extracurriculars programs. I know people won't agree with that, but it's more important to keep our kids and staff members safe, in my opinion. So I'm also open to eliminating the SEL coaches so long as other relevant student supports are maintained or enhanced. They do play a role in our district, and we do need to make sure that that role is being maintained and our students are taken care of. I don't agree with cutting vacant special ed resource room positions without adding a stipend for teachers that are taking on that extra workload. The workload, I mean, even if we filled all the positions, it's still a heavy workload. We do have, some tough responsibilities for our students in our district, and I don't think it's fair or moral to really throw that on the extra teachers and just expect them to do it without any extra pay. So that's something that I would want us to focus on. It would still be a cost saver than hiring all those, I think it was like 7 positions or something like that, maybe 5. Even just like 10 grand stipend or something, anything would help. I think it would be fair. Let's see here. I am not going to ever support cutting the LHS and the LMS librarians. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to vote for a budget that does that, and I want to make that clear right now. I appreciate the thoughts of going in to try and be creative, but that's just something I want to take off the table right here. I personally would rather keep the HR specialist position, but I want to look at, I guess, like when I mention cuts in the central office, I guess if I can be more specific, I'd like to see a restructuring of the teaching and learning department. Like, to give an example, when I was, teaching last year in the district, sometimes the coaches were pulled to, instead of being in the classroom, were pulled to Dingley to work on creating those rubrics. And in my opinion, the rubrics didn't exactly match the reality of the classroom and the grading process that we used as teachers. For example, in some of the rubrics, it said that it was critical for classroom teachers to collaborate with ML teachers, with special education teachers. But my students went to 2 ML teachers and 2 special education teachers, and us teachers were never allocated any time to meet with them. So when were we supposed to properly even use those rubrics? So I personally, I'd rather have a system where teachers are given discretion over the grading, of course, using the 0 through 4 system. So I just feel like creating those rubrics was not a good use of time, and that time could have been spent for those coaches in the classroom. So I know there are people that are between the school coaches, the instructional coaches that work in the classroom and to the top level, and the positions in the middle, I would like to see eliminated. Let's see. I do have concerns too with eliminating the 2 duty aid teachers. I know there are some contractual obligations, and it's escaping exactly what it is, but I know there's some kind of minimum we need to meet. And so I just want to make sure that we're meeting the minimum before we have a deeper conversation about cutting those. And again, I apologize. I wish I'd written more down about that, but might be something for us to certainly look into. Let's see, only a couple other things. I also wonder how the tech concerns are going to be addressed if we cut the tech integration coaches, particularly at the elementary levels. I mean, I've made it no secret that I don't think students 5th grade and below should really be using iPads, except for the testing and things that we absolutely need them to. I'd much rather go to another model, and I think it would be much more effective for teaching and learning. I'll be honest, I'm terrible at using iPads, and teachers were just really not trained that well in how to use them. I mean, I'm 35 and I can barely use this thing. And so knowing that my students could use them much better than I could does make me a little bit nervous. And I know there are new tools that were applied this year, and I'm very happy to hear that. But again, I would rather go away from using the technology at the 5th grade and below. So I do wonder if we're still using them, though, what kind of supports do we have for teachers it might be a larger conversation for us about making sure teachers have the supports they need to properly monitor students and make sure they, are able to teach successfully with those. So those are my thoughts here going forward. And I know the kind of approach has been all of us just kind of saying, what we would like to see. And again, I'd like to see more of like a formal kind of parking lot set up that we can eventually go through line by line and do like a formal thumbs up or thumbs down. But those are my thoughts right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Member Jensen. So I see the hands. I'm just going to make a quick comment on the structure here. So I think what I would suggest is something very similar to what Member Jensen just said, and that was kind of I think where my mind was going. So the superintendent does have a couple other slides, which I think we should get through, and certainly we'll have more time for questions and general reactions and comments. But I do think to make some sense of this, because there are a lot of different topics in categories, but also at the same time, I don't think we'll be able to um, just one-off have each of us talk through our opinion on all of them at once. I think we are going to need to just try to pinpoint the categories and straw poll it, basically, would be the way to do it, and just try to get a sense to build up an overall package that could later on get a majority vote. Just because there are a lot of different items here and I think different opinions. So with that, Member Bowden and then Member Glenn.
Thank you. So I'm not going to go into my full spiel on like what I'm thinking as far as the budget, but Member Jensen said a couple things that struck me, and I just really feel the need to say something in return. First and foremost, I agree. I do not think the budget is going to pass, unfortunately. And I've said that all along, and it's not because of the work that we're doing. It's just the general public's way of releasing their frustrations on the budget in general. And it really isn't even the school budget, it's the budget. So that said, I disagree about not reducing a lot because of that. I actually think that we need to take an approach of we need to reduce everything that we possibly can to try to get this budget to pass the first time around. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing that I wanted to say is that I don't know if you know the statistic, but 95% of the I'm drawing a blank right now. Hold on. I want to say the Fortune 500 CEOs in this country played organized sports either in high school or at a collegiate level or both. And cutting extracurricular activities in sports to me is probably one of the worst things that we could do as a school district. And I think when somebody suggests that, it's maybe because you didn't play organized sports or you didn't grow up doing it, and that's fine. But I will say, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but my daughter is using sports as a vessel to pay for school. She is at school on a full scholarship because of organized sports. And organized sports teaches you so much more than just how to win or lose a game. There is so much more to it and so many life lessons to it. And it creates the CEOs of this country. And that's my opinion. And I will never, ever cut our athletics. I will never vote for that.
Member Glenn.
I don't know how to say this, but I think we have to make the deepest cuts. I think we have to go with an A, only because, I mean, everyone is saying that it's not going to pass anyway. Well, if we're sitting here talking, well, it's not going to pass anyway, so why don't we just do this? It's not going to, because people are not stupid. If we're playing a game and we're just trying to, see, they're gonna not pass it anyway, so why don't we just go with, the least, cuts? That's I don't agree with that. I think we need to make an honest attempt to make the deepest cuts, and then if it doesn't pass, then we come back and we do it again. But to say, let's just waffle on this and because it's not going to pass anyway, I think we're doing a very large disservice to everybody. So, I think that, and a lot of good ideas came up, but we don't have time for them. That would be for next year's budget to see about consolidating and doing this and doing that. The vote is less than a month away. We don't have time to fix things that.
Member Haig and then back to Member Jensen after that, and then Member Harper. Member Hurd, yes.
Thank you. Sorry. So just a few things. So I actually had a conversation with Jake Friday, maybe, I don't know. And I called because I wanted a little bit of reassurance, I guess. Because again, I'm going to say this, and I said this last time, like we have to remember the lane. We have to remember what our lane is as the school committee. And so we don't know the operations of the day-to-day. We don't know that's just not where we are. And so in speaking to him, I had said, you met with all your admins and you kind of discussed about what you can live with, what you can live without, obviously what their wish lists are. And I asked him point blank, I said, okay, so the list that you gave us of cuts is what your admins are telling you that they can live without, correct? And I was hoping he would say yes. He did not say yes. He actually said, most of them came to me and said, these are the positions I want you to add. And so for me, I was trying to wrap my brain around it. Like, how are we going to educate our kids? How are we going to teach them social emotional skills? How are we going to keep them safe? How are we going to do all those things? And so, in just thinking about it a little bit more, for me, one of the big things is that we have all of our special ed services and staff and stuff because by law we are required to provide that. We have all of our multilingual services and providers and stuff because again, by law we are required to provide that. But how are we going to continue to provide for let's just say our average Joe kids, our kids that are in the middle that don't fall in one of those categories? How are we going to keep them engaged? How are we going to keep them learning? How are we going to continue to provide for those kids that don't fall into one of those other categories, that the law requires us to provide for? And in my mind, the way in doing that is to keep our classrooms a place where learning can happen, where they feel safe, where they feel secure, where the teachers can teach without being interrupted every 5 seconds. And, having to empty a classroom because a child's having, a moment or whatever. And so I don't actually like any of these options. I don't like any of them. But as a school committee, we need to remember, and especially the members who have been here for a while, there has never been a budget season where we sat here and we said, I want this, I don't want this. Like we've never cherry picked like that. And for some reason this year, we think that that's where we should be doing it. And it's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. We have never in the 5 years that I've been doing this have ever done that. I have always had confidence in Jake and his team at Dingley that they know what's best and how best to run our schools. That's why they get paid the money they get paid to do. And so the fact that we're sitting here cherry picking, saying like, well, I don't want this and I don't want this position, I want to pull this position, like we're not going to get anywhere. We have to just, honestly, I feel like we have to say like, this is my number. I want a number. I want to cut $1 million. I want to cut $1.5 million. I want to cut $2 million. I don't want to cut any. But this going back and forth and picking and choosing positions is not going to work. And so that's what I think we need to do is come up with a number. I don't want to sit here and listen to members drag on for 20 minutes about what they want and what they don't. I think a number is the best way to go about this and the easiest way to get us where we're going to go. I would like to see the SEL positions restructured. I think that's what works best for our district. More of a dean type position where they're dealing with hotspots. They're pulling kids from classrooms instead of emptying a whole classroom. That is how, in my mind, the way that Jake explained it to me, that is how we get back to, again, making sure that everybody in the classroom is having an actual experience. And I also have to say, I will never vote for reducing sports or extracurricular activities. Lewiston prides themselves on equity, and you are going to find out real quick the haves and the have-nots if you take away sports, because you're going to have your kids whose parents can pay $4,000 to play travel sports, and then your other kids are going to have nothing. So I will never be in favor of that. But I would really like us, instead of picking positions, to pick a number that we feel comfortable with.
If I could just react to that quickly, and then I'll continue to those who had hands up. I think, I guess I'll just say my opinion as a member in this case is that I agree in part. I mean, I think there is some value, and it is a route the committee could go to just say, this is the number we want to see. It's your choice, superintendent. We don't have to do that. And I was looking back at the sheet from a couple of years ago that I shared with the superintendent to reference for this kind of setup. And I had notes from our conversation on there. It's like, we'll take this position out, put this one back in. It wasn't as thorough, frankly, as we've discussed now, but I think that is in part because we were not discussing laying people off who are currently in a position. So I think that puts a little more pressure on us in these discussions to really dig in, probably more than we would otherwise think to do, because they're not just vacant positions. So I think I'm maybe somewhere in between. I agree. I'm wary of going literally line by line, position by position, but I do think this is my opinion, and it is up to the committee at the end of the day, but I do think there's some value in at least discussing some of the categories, the student support restructuring that was proposed, the library, the admin kind of categories as the superintendent put it up earlier. So that's my opinion. We could choose to not do that and just say, this is the number we want to see, go at it. But I think there might be somewhere in between those two extremes that we can talk about those categories. So there were a couple hands up. I believe Member Jensen was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify what I said before, and I don't think the budget will pass the first round. At this point, there's no fat to cut. We're chopping off limbs, and I don't think we should chop off more limbs than we need to. I did state very clearly that I very much was willing to compromise with you all to find some agreement moving forward. The personal attack was completely unnecessary. I did play sports growing up until I was about 13 and have a rare muscular skeletal disorder. I can't even extend my arms all the way. Shoulders pop out of place all the time. I lost my athletic competitive when I was about 13, 14. It's quite devastating, to be honest. So to say that I don't understand what I'm talking about because I didn't do sports at that age is very cruel. And I don't appreciate it. Now, going forward, though, I do think it is important that we understand that we are in control of the budget here. We do have the decision because we are responsible to the taxpayers and our constituents. And so I think our administration is looking for direction from us on how to move forward here. And I don't think we're doing a great job of giving it. So I'm trying to give some suggestions here to things we can put on the parking lot that we can go through and make this a nice, clear process. I don't feel like we've made very much progress since we started this. So let's just please try to act more mature as we approach this, try to be more efficient. I don't want to be here all night. I'm a sub. I sub, every day. I worked in our district last year. I spoke several times during public comment last year as a teacher, wasn't listened to once. I've had conversations with several of you guys in private, didn't really feel listened to afterwards as well. And so I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't know more about what happens in the classroom than some other people here. And I highly suggest that people volunteer more in our schools to get a better understanding of what it's like to teach in the classroom. No, I don't want to cut the athletic programs, extracurriculars. Again, athletics, I kind of backed off, but the extracurriculars absolutely made me who I am today. I don't want to cut those. But when you see ed techs have chairs thrown at them because we don't have enough staff members to maintain a safe school environment, when you see an ed tech at the doorway to your classroom have a door slam into the back of her head and she's concussed and out for the rest of the week, it does have an impact on you. It's a dangerous situation in a lot of our schools right now. And that was at McMahon, the school that all the school committee members get their kids transferred to. So you think about what happens at the other schools. The dangerous situation's happening. And we need to address that. And to say that we just need to set a number for the budget without concerning ourselves about the safety and the well-being of our students and staff members is just not something I support. And again, we're all up here to represent our own constituents, ourselves, our beliefs. That is just my opinion. I'm not making it personal. I don't appreciate the personal attacks.
All right. All right. We need to not have crosstalk from committee members while the meeting continues. So Member Harper, you were next, and then Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I I can understand the perspective of wanting to have a number, and I think I'm aligned with you, Phoenix, of saying like I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that, I understand the need from the admin side to a number to put together, but at the same time, a number is pretty arbitrary. And I think I am, I'm interested in outcomes and in outcomes as far as kind of maintaining that baseline of safety, a baseline of learning. And I want to, I guess, get behind a approach that, has people go through. I've never done a parking lot system, but it does make some sense to me to kind of like figure out where people are have concerns and then kind of go through for those particular areas, maybe not the line by line for the entire thing. And I know I'm the only brand new person on this committee, but I think, what you said, Phoenix, does resonate with me. This feels like a different year. We're talking about cutting active staff, which is just it's an awful thing. And there's not a single position within the school system that I would say like they are, not needed. I think we need our staff, and we have a really high need school district. And so, but we do have to face cuts. So, yes, so this is very difficult, but I think that it makes sense to treat this differently. Also, this revaluation situation is awful. And it also kind of rings as just like this hasn't happened in 40 years. And so this also feels like kind of an unprecedented situation where we have to maybe dig in deeper and kind of wrestle with things a little bit more than we have in the past. So I have lots of thoughts about individual things, but I just wanted to say that piece for now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Counselor Harriman, and then Member Reeves.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on kind of the overall number that we're looking at. I think it was Member Jensen who said that we need some room to move in case the budget does get reduced, and I agree with that. I get the argument on the other side of that, but I think it's difficult for people when they are voting on the school budget, if they're concerned about a large tax increase on their home, and when they go in and vote, whether that paper says 130 million or 129.2 or 127.6, it's hard to translate that into what that means on their own budget. So I think we do need room. If we make cuts now, I think we need to leave some room in case more cuts need to be made later. I would also say that on the options that are proposed, the A, B, and C, I would prefer a option D that doesn't cut as many. I realize that you have these other proposals to add things back in to sort of restructure things, but I honestly would like to keep more of the positions than option C proposes to cut. I did also want to ask for a clarification on these options, and I think I got it, but so in A and B, it proposes cutting both the high school and the middle school librarians. And I was concerned that that might mean there's no coverage at all, but it sounds like if we took one of those options, you would have this other position added back in to cover both. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that potential position is in that bottom number.
Okay, thanks.
Member Reeves.
Thanks. Okay, so I am for the minimal cuts. We're already having safety issues in the schools, and cutting more human adults from the scene is never a good idea in my opinion, or not a good idea given our baseline. I wanted to read out what the superintendent has on one of the slides. We do have concerns about levels of reduction diminishing our capacity, creating risks that should be considered, or an effort being so under-resourced it becomes dysfunctional. That's Jake speak for. Yikes, oh my God, this is terrible. Jake is never someone who speaks in radical ways or, incontrovertible ways. He's always hedging, being careful with his language. But when I see that, I see Jake saying, this is terrible, we're in trouble, this could go very badly. That's what I read there. I don't know if I'm right, but I believe I am. So I would go for C if we have to choose from ABC. And I would hope that some additions are still taken from that list of additions, even if we go with C. Thank you.
Counselor Aaron, do you have something to add before we?
Yes, just real quick. I meant to say that if we look into the future as well, our population, our student population is growing, at least now, and it's probably going to continue to grow. So it's just tough to, I realize that, taxpayers don't have bottomless pockets, but it's also tough to talk about cutting positions, especially positions that work directly with students or work in schools supporting students and staff when our population is likely to grow further. And it just means an even greater distance between, or even a greater ratio of students to staff. So that's tough.
Okay. Okay. I saw a hand from Member Hawkins and then Member Bowden.
I'll try to be really quick here. I listened to what everybody said because that's what I do is I listen and then I formulate. I very much agree with Scott and Elizabeth here. I see the after effects of how our schools work currently on the school bus. And I will tell you, I see some amazing, and I mean absolutely amazing progress. And I see some truly scary, we're just scraping by. And that's as we are right now. I know we want to put everybody at ease. We're not going to drive your taxes up. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep our heads above water. And I very much agree with Elizabeth about what she saw when she read the blurb from Jake, because I went the same way. Oh, that's not a happy thought. I'm really lucky. I know all my students by face and by name. I understand most of where a lot of them are coming from because I see it in their behavior. My coworkers, they're not going to come in here and say it, but some of the behavior issues we see is a direct result of barely having what we need to keep things going. And in some ways, we do amazing jobs with what we have. I'm really afraid that if we cut a whole bunch because it looks good, and that's what people want to hear, we're going to cut our feet off and then have to hobble around and end up in huge trouble in 2 years when we get another influx of little people who are starting school. I understand we're in a really bad position. It's not great. It sucks all the way around. But if you start from we're already underwater and then try to grab a couple floaties here and there, you're still not above water. I understand with the revaluation, I'm going to see it in my rent. And that's scary enough because I'm a school bus driver. I'm not exactly rolling in money. Nobody in the city is. And if they are, hey, share. But anyway, I understand how important sports can be and extracurriculars can be. But if we can't manage basic education, sports is what? And I'm not saying cut it, but remember that there are other things that are important too. There are other ways to learn the things you learn in sports that don't have to be paid for by the schools. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so I saw a hand from Member Bowden, and then I'd like to speak about that parking lot.
Thank you. So I recall like years ago with the previous superintendent, he paid and had this whole forecast done about how much growth we're going to see in this city. And it turned out to be like complete garbage. And it wasn't true at all. And so I feel like what we've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we've had some steady increase, but nothing like we haven't shot up like population wise. It's kind of just chilling, right? It's kind of stayed like that. And we have our new housing in downtown. It's all in. There's a lot more coming. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's 4 projects that I know of that are currently underway.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, our enrollment has it trickled up and it's kind of stayed this year. And we anticipate growth. All the models say growth, but
Yeah.
to be seen.
Okay. So I just want to put that out there. So like when we're talking about like, whoa, we're anticipating it, we're going to get more, well, maybe not, like none of us actually know. And you can pay someone to do a big fancy report, but that doesn't mean it's going to be accurate. So, I guess for me, um, when I look at all of this, I don't love any of the options either. But at the end of the day, the recommendation from the superintendent would be option A, which represents the largest decrease. And I think when we are looking at a referendum where taxpayers are coming out to vote, I think they will appreciate that we have done all that we can do rather than, you know, doing the bare minimum. I would be inclined to go with the superintendent's recommendation because he's the superintendent of our schools. He's the one who has had to talk to all the admins, who spends the time in the schools, who spends the time figuring out what can work and what can't work. And if we can't trust his recommendation, I don't know better than Jake. So I'm not going to pretend I do. So for me, I would be more inclined to just go with Jake's recommendation on this and hope that the taxpayers can appreciate that we are making giant cuts and as many as we possibly can, and hopefully that appeases them.
Okay. So I think most have shared some at least high level opinion or in some cases some specifics as well, to be fair. So what I'm going to suggest, and again, it's up to the committee if we want to proceed this way, but to try to go through first with the kind of that list and the option packages as the superintendent has shared. Actually, if you don't mind putting that back up, and try to categorize a little bit and take a temperature of the committee on some of those categories. So as I kind of see them, and we can break it up in different ways if the committee would like. One is the category that the superintendent put under that Dingley and administrative cuts kind of heading, which was up above, but those positions are also included in this list. So that's covering the HR specialist, clinical supervisor, the 2 special ed APs, the tech specialists and coaches, as well as the facilities deferral and the nutrition reduction. Okay, actually, I'm just gonna read out the parking lot as I understand it. Okay, and then we can go through the individuals and discuss. So that's one, right? The kind of Dingley category. Another, if you don't mind putting that back up. I would say the student support position. So this is things like the social worker at Montello, the dean of students at Montello. I think we could probably separate those from the, it sounds like there's been some separate discussion around the SEL coaches, so that might be a separate item. The librarians is a separate one, the special ed resource room teachers, the other coach positions, and I think that might be it for categories as of what has already been presented. But please correct me if I'm wrong on that. And there's been some other suggestions outside of this. So Member Jensen mentioned, teaching and learning division, and I think that might be it for other things totally not kind of reflected here. So I know I'm just kind of listing out some categories as I see them, and we can talk through them. And again, my suggestion would be we just do a little straw poll on how people feel about those positions being in or out. And we can break it up in different ways if people would prefer, if that's not, you know, people feel differently about one versus the other. But that would be my suggestion at this point. Are there any items that were missed? Any other suggestions for how to go about this? Any other thoughts? Yeah, Member Harper.
Thanks. So there's the grant funded social work positions. And um, I think the multilingual coach is in a slightly different category than the math and literacy. And yeah, maybe that's as far as like broad categories go.
Okay. Superintendent, does that categorization make sense to you? And is there anything else you would suggest?
I think that's a good start. Karen's capturing them as we go. We do have a parking lot document that we can put up if that's
Oh,
where we
yeah.
go. So
Yeah, if you've already prepared that, that might be an easier way to visualize it. Anything else while yes, Member Heard.
So this isn't necessarily on a parking lot category, but we can hire all the staff in the world we want, and we can have one-to-ones for each kid in our classroom. But until we start requiring parents to take responsibility for their children's actions, nothing is going to get better. And there is a lot of limitations, unfortunately, by law. But in my mind, I'm thinking those types of student resource services are hopefully where some of that stuff can start happening. Because unfortunately, public school falls under an institution type, and it's really parents that send their kids every day so that they can go to work or so they can have 8 hours to themselves. And so that is where I think, you know, we can really make a difference, is if we're doing that work to start, you know, holding the line at some point somewhere.
Okay, thank you. I also just want to clarify I think the way this could go, if we do go through parking lot, so to speak, is then likely to come back at a next meeting and actually vote on one final number, package, everything all at once, hopefully, if we can come to enough agreement now. And, you know, clear up any questions about are the additions in the total number and all that kind of stuff, not have to worry about that, just have one single final proposal. And, you know, doesn't preclude us from making tweaks then, but I think we can kind of work through some of the more line item things and then come back with a final vote. Okay. Were you going to add something?
So I just have two thoughts to try to, in an attempt to streamline. So we can gather items on this list as one method. I could also make a copy of the reductions list, and we can go through and create kind of option D if that's what the group wants. But for things like what Member Harper said, the sunsetting grant positions, we can put that in as an item. We can get you a cost and plug it in. I don't know if that's useful, or if you want to use this method where we're dropping things in, or do you want to look at a list and pull things off, or neither?
Just my suggestion would be we just try to take the categories first, and then maybe we get down to that level of detail. So if you don't mind, this might require a little flipping back and forth, I apologize, but just if you pull up that other document, just so we can see that list under the, what you categorize as Dingley and administration. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, the superintendent always has about 600 tabs open, so it takes a second to arrange.
Sorry, I'm creating this in a different window because if it's all in Google, I have to go stop share, shift tab, start share. So this should allow me to go from tab to tab.
Okay, if you don't mind just going up to the prior page. Thank you for your patience, everybody. So this is the question, I guess, for the committee. Are there any items in this list? And if needed, we can also scroll down and look at the numbers, but are there any items in this list that members would prefer to actually see added back into an ultimate budget proposal? So again, these are positions that are currently recommended to be out of the budget, right? To be reduced. The question is, is the will of the committee to keep those reductions in place or to add any back? Any reactions, comments? Yes, Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would add back human resources specialist, assistant principal, second assistant principal, and the middle and high school tech integration coaches.
Member Harper, did you have a hand up?
Yes, thank you. Have we been informed of what the deferred facilities projects encompass? I'm sure there's a lot of different pieces there, but it seems important to know what we're deferring.
Yeah, Bill can speak to that. We did talk about some ADA projects that are recommended but not mandatory.
Yeah. It's several ADA type projects that kind of add up. So it's across all the schools. And essentially we kind of looked at what we had spent this year on projects, and that's what we're using for next year. So those you would probably see in asks through an LCIP project in a future year, or we would ask again next year, or we'd also every year we apply for the revolving funds as well. But some of those projects, the only ones that would be qualifying for the revolving funds would be anything ADA.
Member Hurd?
I'm gonna be real nitpicky for a second. Can you turn off the lights at 287 Main? I drove by the other day and there were lights on in the building. Thank you.
So the main lights should be shut off inside the hallways, but we do have to keep lights on in the stairwells.
I'm pretty sure it was like offices. It's on like the third floor, whatever those offices that face like the road. I drove by the other night and I'm like, we're pinching pennies for budget, but you're leaving the lights on at 287 Main.
All right.
I'm gonna kill you.
Now that it's nice weather, I take a walk up there every day, so I'll pop in.
Okay, so Member Jensen has suggested moving some positions back in, as he said. Other reactions, Councilor Harriman?
I just wonder if we could go through real quick which of these positions are vacant right now and which are filled.
Yeah, so I'll do my best starting at the top, and others, my fact checkers, can correct me if I'm wrong. Human Resources Specialist is filled. District Clinical Supervisor recently resigned. Assistant Principal, the elementary level, we do have a resignation. The other one is filled. The specialist is filled. 3 of the 4 integrator coach positions are filled.
Yes.
I think I missed the specialist. That's also filled. Sorry, technology integration specialist is also filled.
Councilor Harriman?
Yeah, I guess if we're going to go through, I would just go with those 3 positions there that are currently vacant and reduce those ones. If we think we can live without the clinical supervisor, the special ed assistant principal, and the one of those coaches, I would just start with just the vacant positions.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. So, I'm actually okay with all of those reductions. For me personally, our student support is what for me feels a little bit more important. I also think, COVID brought on an era of technology use, and we've kind of been lazy and kind of continuing along that path. And so, as Member Jensen said, I would actually like to see that dial back a little bit and get back to paper and pencil and books and, all of those other things that we all went to school doing and we turned out perfectly fine. So I'm actually okay with those cuts. There aren't actually any that I would add back in, and I actually wouldn't vote for a budget that does include those back in. So
Member Bowden.
Yeah, I just want to say the same. I'm fine with all of those being cut and, between the state budget, the city budget, this budget, like there needs to be cuts because at the state level, it's bad. And at the city level, it's not looking any better. So like this needs to happen.
Well, I'll say my reaction, and then I would be welcome to hear everyone's. But I think that I would support including all of these reductions in the budget. That's not an easy thing to say. This is many people's employment, and that is going to be true about most of what we talk about. But unfortunately, I do think this is the I do think that these reductions are needed and necessary in this circumstance. That is my opinion. Again, just to clarify, I think it would be helpful to hear everyone's opinion on these items, because we do just need to. We're trying to get a sense of where we could end up for a final package. Not going to make any. Yeah, remember going.
Yeah. As terrible as it is and as hurtful as it can be, reductions are necessary. That's why even a D, just as a category D, just doesn't seem plausible. There needs to be cuts, and we have to make that decision. Not easy, not fun, but we can't add even anything. We just can't. Um, so that's my opinion.
Member Hawkins.
As much as I hate it, unfortunately, the Dingley administrative cuts I think are going to be necessary in an effort just to find some anything. Yeah.
Yeah, Member Harper.
Agree, painful, but these admin cuts, I think are, as far as where, direct student facing is where, my larger concern is.
Okay.
Ditto.
Okay.
Ditto. The student-facing roles are the ones that absolutely need to be protected, and the administrative cuts, which we advocated for as a committee, I think we need to go with.
Okay. Okay. So I think everyone has shared at least an initial opinion on this one. I will, at the risk of confusing this, I do want to again call out. So in the additions category, right, related to this section, there is one addition of an innovation/technology specialist teaching and learning. So my understanding, the superintendent correct me, is that the recommendation would be if we are making these reductions, that we be adding that one position to make up for these, how many is that? 5 that are removed. We could use this time, and in fact, I might just recommend it just so we get clarify that all this kind of works together, that I would support having that addition in place. But if others have other opinions, I would that now would be a good time to share them. Actually, I guess I should confirm with the superintendent that that understanding is correct and that is your recommendation.
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, any other, yes, member Glant and then member Hawkins.
I agree, and maybe we could do a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something that kind of,
Yeah,
would do that.
any verbal opinions anyone would like to add before that? Yes, member Hawkins.
I agree very much with what you have said, Phoenix. And I think we need to make sure that we stress to people who will be relying on this person for assistance that they're doing the job of multiple people and to seek alternate options as much as possible so as not to overstress one person doing 5 people's jobs. I think there's way too many people these days doing 5 people's jobs for the pay of one. We do it way too much everywhere these days. And if you need help, get help. If you're bored and want to talk to somebody, there's all sorts of ways to do that.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? So generally, are people in support of this addition? And there's some who don't like that addition, or would you like to speak? You don't have to, but.
No, I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit confused with the process here. I'm just very much used to like a single list that we kind of go through at the end and just breaking it up in the category. I'm a little lost right now. If we could just get a clarification on what we're deciding here.
So you mean the addition that I was just referencing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So that is not listed in this particular document. This was a sheet. I'm reading off of a sheet that was handed out at a previous meeting. That does list again, it's an innovation/technology specialist for teaching and learning. That would be under Article 5. And as discussed at previous meetings, that is to, I'm not sure what the right word is, restructure, replace, in place of those 5 technology integration positions, that would be in place. Does that help clarify?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I understand it is, we're not looking at it all in one place, so I do apologize for that, but hopefully we can work through it. Okay. Any last comments on this item before we continue on? And yeah, I do appreciate we're kind of piecing together the categories a little bit on the fly here, but we have talked about them a fair amount, and the superintendent previously did share some slides that kind of discuss these categories as well. I would suggest that we try to tackle a somewhat challenging one, which is the coaching positions, other than these technology integration coaches. And I recognize that there's kind of a few layers to this. So, superintendent, it would be wiser if I ask you to just list these instead of me trying to do it. So do you mind just describing the proposed reductions in coaching positions outside of those tech integration coaches that we just discussed?
Sure. I see 2 different types. I see the SEL coach position at Geiger and Farwell. Those are the only 2 that are locally funded in that nature. So that could be one subcategory. The other ones would be the multilingual, the literacy, and the math coaching positions that are on this list connected to the middle and high school.
So I'm suggesting these all as a category. They are all coaches in that respect, but I understand they serve different functions, and members may or may not have different opinions about different ones. But I think at least to kind of start the discussion as a category, it's worth considering. So if initial reactions, yes, member, I'm sorry, just since I saw all of you raise your hand, I'll start with Counselor Harriman and then work our way up.
I guess I would keep them all in. They work in classrooms supporting our teachers and students. So I would keep both of those 2 categories that the superintendent outlined in the budget.
Okay. Member Glant, you had a hand.
I would propose that we keep the literacy coach and the math coach, because we need to learn to write and to be able to do math. So those are the basic things, and I think we should keep, while we're trying to keep stuff, let's keep the basics. Let's keep our literacy and let's keep our math.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. So I am fine reducing the SEL as long as we are I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. Restructuring, thank you. Those positions into the other 5. I am also okay with reducing the other coaches as Karen had stated that we are sharing. So we're not completely getting rid of them. We still have some, but we're sharing. Or not we, but the middle school and high school are sharing. So I am okay with those, as it sounds like admin has plans for ways to, cover those.
We don't have to go in order, but if you have comments, you're welcome to share.
If it was my option, I would keep them because they're doing good work. And I don't, our system struggles enough without cutting people. They're doing good work. I'm not saying that there's anybody who's not. I know everyone is trying their best. But I'm sorry, multilingual is important. We have a lot of children who are, and not even, and people who are becoming young adults who are learning new languages and trying to parse out, how do I translate this to this and make it make sense? They need the assistance, and the teachers need to be able to understand them. And coaches help make that possible. That's, yeah.
Member Harper.
Similar to Member Hurd, I am also okay with the SEL reductions as long as there's a plan for behavioral supports. I am also okay with the proposed half reduction of the math and lit coaches. The multilingual coach, I feel like is a really for the middle school and the high school. I know that someone is retiring, but it also feels like a really high where we have some schools with just extremely high rates of multilingual learners. Yeah, it feels important. And then as far as are there other coaches that I'm missing?
Not in terms of what was proposed in the superintendent's budget.
Okay. Then.
If I had my druthers, we'd keep them all. Now that I understand better the SEL restructuring plan, I'm not against that any longer. I used to be. The other coaches, multilingual, if they're retiring, that might be an opportunity because there won't be a person being fired or let go. But our population, getting rid of any multilingual support seems ill-advised. And the math and literacy, obviously, the focus of a school is math and literacy. The idea was to restructure them to be half-half. Am I correct? So we're not getting rid of it. We're shifting it around a bit. But again, my druthers keep it all.
So I'm on board with the reductions of the coaches that are in the general fund. As far as the multilingual coach goes, we have an excellent director of multilingual in this district, and we have excellent multilingual teachers in this district. And the one coaching position, I don't think is a make or break for us. So I'm completely fine with eliminating that. I don't think it would be on the chopping block if it wasn't okay to eliminate that position. So, yeah, I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the idea of moving away from the SEL coaching model to a social worker practitioner model. So in that regards, I could, understand cutting the SEL coach positions, as kind of heartbreaking as it is to say. So long as we do move in that towards that practitioner model, the rest I'd want to keep.
Yeah, this isn't a easy one. I think I would be okay with reducing all of the suggested coaching positions, in part understanding that this is not all of the coaching positions in the district. There are others primarily funded through title funds, but a couple that are still in local funds. That said, that would be my preference, but I think if there were, I don't think there's a perfect consensus among the committee here, but I think I could get behind retaining the literacy and math coaches. Just yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I should say the superintendent did have a slide regarding coaching positions. Would that be, I apologize for not suggesting this earlier, but would that be worth sharing? Is that particularly relevant to this conversation, or is that different?
To be honest, I think I can just say it out loud. You do have in your packet. I don't think it's as relevant to this as the others. This was more what else is in the budget, in the regular fund, in the local fund that we hadn't yet discussed. That's all that was. And it was a total of three. There was two halves and two whole positions. And so that's what that slide represents. It doesn't directly represent these reductions. I felt it was asked to know what's left if we were to reduce more coaches. That's what that slide represents.
So let me restate what I think might have consensus is definitely too strong a word, but might be able to gain enough support, which would be eliminating again, and please, members can jump in if this is not quite the right read, but we could probably get enough support behind just retaining the literacy and math, but not the other, not the SEL, and it sounds like not the multilingual coach positions. This doesn't have to be, you know what, let me be fair with sorry, were you about to add something? Let me be fair with the straw poll kind of idea and be a little clear on this. So I'm just going to say, this is my understanding of something that could get enough support, and then let's just see. This would be reducing the SEL coach positions, reducing the multilingual coach position, and retaining the literacy and math coaching positions. Are there any that I'm missing in that statement? Okay. Yes, the question about that?
Just to clarify, I think what you're proposing is the superintendent's proposal, right? Option A, basically, the restructure. Because that proposes to keep the math and the lit at halftime.
So by reducing is what creates the half. And so right now there's a position at the middle and high school in the literacy and math. By reducing a full role, we would then try to divide and conquer. So what you said is right on both fronts. It is a reduction of two people, literacy math specific, but we would then look to split those responsibilities between two schools. So it would leave half and half, but it would be a reduction of two.
That's what the superintendent proposed.
Right.
What I stated was to not do that and just keep the full-time literacy and math positions. That is what I am suggesting. So here's what I'm just going to say. That is what I'm suggesting here. I'd like to just get a thumbs up to see how many people are supportive of that. If it's not a majority, I would ask if others have another proposal. Yeah, do you have a suggestion?
I think my suggestion would be like with the last slide, you asked, because all of these are up for cuts, right? Who here is okay with that? And then you moved on. So could you propose all of it and see who's okay with it? And if there's not a majority, then we dig into, we'll keep this, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, I think
Okay.
actually you're right. That would be more fair. So I'm not, pushing it one way or the other. So as Member Bowden stated, the coach position reductions in the superintendent's budget each of those reductions, including, the downsizing of the literacy and math to halftime. So please give a thumbs up if that is what you would prefer to see in the final budget proposal. Okay. And I'm assuming that the rest would prefer something else. Okay. Is that clear enough in what you're asking? Okay, thank you. So in that case, I would go back to what I had said, which is in the absence of that. So reducing the SEL coach positions, reducing the multilingual coach position, but not reducing those literacy and math coach positions. So please show a thumbs up if that is what you would like to see. Okay, so that's 4, not a majority either. So if I would be interested if somebody else has a proposal they would like to suggest. Yes, Member Harper.
I would like to propose the SEL reduction, keeping the proposed reduction of math and lit coaches, and then keeping the multilingual coach. So keeping this basically the superintendent's proposal with coaches, except keeping the multilingual.
Thank you. I understood. Yes, Member Hurd.
So just a clarifying question here. As a district, we receive funding from the state depending on our level of multilingual learners.
We do. The subsidy can be a little funny, but yes, we do. These positions are able to be reduced without us violating specific obligations. If we go deeper than this, I think Liza would have some more input, but we are able to meet our legal obligations in this proposal.
Okay, and then there's also the potential, I know a couple members had said like, where we are, we have a lot of multilingual learners in our district. We don't want to reduce those any further, and I agree. But if we do get more multilingual learners, there is a potential for extra subsidy to potentially fund other positions, correct?
Yes.
In the
In
recent
theory.
ED 279 adjustment, one of the things that was discussed, but don't know what will be appropriated, was the elimination of hardship funding, which that may fall under. But that's not a problem that we have in the moment that I would project as we will have next year, but I might have to retract that statement. So the idea of hardship funds just coming because the state's doing that, they're shifting that model. Depending on how they appropriate, those funds might be the first to go away.
Yeah, follow up.
Yeah. So I would, to wrap my brain around it, I would be, I would be in favor of Member Harper's to keep the multilingual because I feel like if our students are better versed in English, the literacy and math will kind of like, maybe in my mind, that's the way I'm making sense of it, kind of comes, with it. So I would be in favor of reducing to the halves, taking the SEL, but keeping the multilingual coach.
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Member Harper also said in the rest of the superintendent's proposal, which in my proposal was those other roles, those dean-like roles, is that part of this conversation at this point, or is
No.
that separate?
No.
It's separate.
Okay.
Member Glenn.
Yes, so my question is, the multilingual coach is Lewiston Middle School and Lewiston High School. We would still have coaches at the elementary level, correct?
So it's reducing, just like the literacy and math, it's reducing by one position. And because right now there's a multilingual coach at the middle school and a multilingual coach at the high school. So this is eliminating the multilingual coach at the high school, and then the middle school coach will be split between the middle school and the high school. So we're
Okay.
not, just like literacy and math, we were not losing them completely, the support of the multilingual literacy or math at the middle school or the high school. It just would be a split position instead of a full-time position.
Right, right. And I guess my question is, are we getting more students that are elementary level that that need those services? I mean, if they're getting them in the elementary school more so, then maybe maybe they don't need them as much as the middle school or high school if we have them right at the beginning.
It's a whole range. We get students of every age level coming in that need multilingual services.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So to restate the suggestion, it is to reduce the 2 SEL coaches, reduce the literacy and math coaches, but not reduce the multilingual coach. Is that correct? Okay, so let's get a thumbs up for people who could get behind that proposal. Okay. The barest majority for that. Just before we move on, are there other suggestions? Now, this is a tough one. I know it's only a handful of positions, but I do want to make sure that there's another more broadly supported option here that we're missing. Anything else that someone would like to suggest? Oh, okay, Member Grant.
Again, we're cutting positions. And if, I can see this going on and on and on, we're going to end up keeping everything and we're not cutting anything. Because where are the cuts going to come from? If we're going to say, we're going to keep this, 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 we're going to keep this. It's just, it's not making any sense to me that we're trying to keep everything, but we're not giving up anything.
Just
No, I'm just saying, we're going to talk about librarians, and I'm pretty sure everyone is going to want to keep those. So where are we going to cut elsewhere? I mean, I'm just saying, I can see how this is going to go. We're not going to make very many cuts. So that's my opinion.
okay. I appreciate sharing that. I might just to clarify, and I'm not trying to, change your opinion at all, but I do just want to clarify that we did, what that was about was one of the 5 positions being added back. So there still are positions being reduced in what we just discussed. I just want to make sure that is clear. I think we should keep going. This is a tough one, but oh, I'm sorry. Was there a hand? No. Okay. So, you know what? Librarians were mentioned. I think this is as good a time as any to discuss that one. Fewer positions under consideration here, so maybe this will be a little more straightforward. So in the superintendent's, again, I should let the superintendent describe what's included here.
In the proposed budget, we reduced the middle school and the high school librarians. We seek, at least in the proposal, to add a 7 through 12 librarian and an ed tech at the high school, at the middle school, so that the library could function.
So sticking with, I think, Member Bowden's suggestion, which does make the most sense, would be to just do a quick straw poll on the superintendent's proposed reductions, just as you just described them. Any comments on that before? Yeah, Member Bowden.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, kind of in the spirit of compromise, that if we're gonna reduce, it seems like a good compromise to, at least we're bringing potentially one back to be the middle school, high school librarian, and then we have ed tech in the other position wherever they're not. So, again, these are tough cuts, but I would be in favor of doing that.
Member Hurd and then Member Glant.
Thank you. So I agree in the spirit of compromise that it does sound like a compromise, and don't get me wrong, books are my thing. I read probably 200 books a year, or more. Like that is, I love reading is the thing that brings me probably the most joy besides my children. But in a world where students have a phone that they can look up information or an iPad or a computer or where they can find that quick information, I feel like this is the best, maybe not the best, but is a good compromise in, if students are really having a hard time finding something or needing some assistance, this provides that. But then for the other students that don't really use the library or require the assistance of a librarian, that they're not going to miss that if that's not there. So again, it's awful. And from someone who is literally a bookworm, it's hard for me, but again, I don't know what other options we have because we can't keep everything.
So I saw a member glance hand and then,
It's just a question. I see the discrepancy between the amount of the LMS is 121 and librarian at LHS is 96. Why the difference of a discrepancy like that?
I don't have them both up in front of me. That's typically the difference between taking family health care and not. Healthcare insurance. Yep.
okay, member Eames.
Librarians don't deal with books. They do deal with books, but they deal with so much more than books. And I think it's information in general, media in general. And as somebody who taught first-year students when they came to college straight out of high school, the difference between somebody who'd had a good literacy or media literacy background and those who didn't is vast. So my feeling is that librarians serve a crucial function in this day and age, not because of books, because of everything else that we live with. They teach how to find good information, sort information, figure out better information, et cetera. So I would not be in favor of cutting any of the librarian positions myself.
Other comments about this item? I would say then for my own part, I probably wouldn't be in favor of this regardless, but I don't think the cost savings is enough to justify it. Again, in my opinion, part of that is due, I think it potentially looks like a little more than it is. The superintendent had referenced earlier that we have to budget these positions based on the median of what it could be, but that's actually a pretty big range. And so a fair amount of the reduction here would be, some is from jumping down to an ed tech position instead of another full librarian, but then part of it is also, as Member Glant picked up, these are individuals who are, potentially in a higher step, but also potentially just making fuller use of the health insurance, and that savings could go away with this switch. It might not really be that big at the end of the day. So both on the substance, I'm not very in favor of the proposal, but then also financially, I don't think it's a big gain for the budget. So that's my opinion on this. So again, this would be just a thumbs up if you are in favor of the reductions as the superintendent has proposed in the superintendent's budget. Any other comments before we do that? Yes, Member Bowden.
Sorry, I just did the math real quick, just so everyone has an idea. It would save us $81,363 if we went down to one librarian for both and with the ed tech. It's my understanding.
Thank you. And that sounds right too.
Yeah, I think that's good rough math. I don't want to quote you, but that does, we've looked at that number prior and that does sound right. I just want to add, and again, big caveat, nobody wants to do this. It's what we've been doing in our elementary schools for 6 years. It's got its weaker spots because of being spread out, but it has functioned. Also in conversations with Auburn Public Schools, they're smaller than us, but I believe they have one librarian for all of their schools, and they have ed techs in their schools. I'm not saying it's ideal. I just wanted you to have that information. I didn't just conjure this out of nowhere.
Thank you. Okay, seems like we're okay to at least do this quick straw poll. So please give a thumbs up if you are in favor of the reductions as the superintendent has proposed. Okay, I see 3. I guess I'll just suggest the opposite of that, which is not including any of those reductions. So keeping the middle school and high school librarian positions as is. Please give a thumbs up if that's what you prefer. Okay, so I do see a majority for that item. Any last comments on that before we move on? Okay, let's move on to, I believe the special education resource room teachers would be its own discussion point. That's just those 2 positions. Am I correct? Sorry, please.
No,
Yes.
resource room positions there. I believe there are 7. Don't quote me.
Sorry.
Much of them, if not all, are vacant. Is that correct, Director Crafts? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that correction. So yes, the 7 special education resource room teachers. Any initial comments from the committee on this? Yes, Member Jensen.
What would the cost be if we gave an extra $5,000 stipend to every special education resource room teacher that took on any extra workload because of the cuts? Do we have a way to calculate that?
Yeah, I'm sure we can find a calculation. That might take a minute, but um, it should be known out loud that special education teachers in our contract already get an additional $5,000, some of them 7 depending on the programs, and some of them 9 depending on other more challenging programs. That's part of the contract as it sits now. 5 and 7, Bill saying. But can you all look at, just give us a rough estimate of what a $5,000 stipend? Yeah, Adam can get that for us.
Member Harper.
Thanks. I have heard, I mean, we got a little bit of information last time about how, like at Montello, for example, there's someone who is an ed tech who's getting an additional stipend to kind of fill that role. And that there are folks who, like, technically the kids who are in that room are technically under a caseload of a teacher who is certified or has the credentials that they need to. And I think what we're hearing is that that person, like just having that additional adult in that room, even though they're not like technically under that caseload, is actually making a really big difference for those teachers. And so, and there was a concern raised that just eliminating like that body, you know, that adult, that carrying adult ed tech in that room. I don't mean to put them, just call them, reduce them to a body, but you know what I mean? A carrying adult in that classroom could be, you know, really stressful in terms of like staff turnover. And I understand that there's the contracts and it's also really tricky to like address that in the budget process versus like the contract negotiation process. So I don't know what options there are there, but I guess I'm just, I just want to flag that it feels like even though, you know, there's a reason why maybe the other roles are vacant too, that it's like maybe a very challenging and not very desirable position, but at the same time, like having someone is very helpful. I'm just flagging the fact that it seems like there is a concern about the workload. And I don't know if just adding additional stipend would help or even if it's even possible. But it just that I am very concerned about like staff turnover and also like the progress that some of the disabled students have been able to make with the additional support. So I'm not a specialist in any of this, and so I don't have a solution, but I just wanted to flag that it seems like a really serious concern.
So just real quickly, because I know that the word stipend has come up a few times in the last several meetings, but I want to be very mindful that with labor law and practices, if we're going to talk about certain people getting a stipend, we really should have an executive session to discuss negotiations. These are collective bargaining agreements, and if we're just going to use a budget process to issue stipends, we could actually be cited with the best of intentions because it's a violation of practice.
Member Jensen and then Member Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I honestly completely agree with my colleague from Ward 4. That thought did come to my mind, Mr. Superintendent. Quite frankly, I wish we had been able to have these conversations much earlier in the term. We were sworn in January and it's almost May. So I wish we had been able to have this conversation earlier. I think this could have been addressed for now. So I apologize.
Which conversation are you referring to? Negotiations or the stipends?
I mean, just more of like how we wanted to approach like special education in the district, and then it probably would have had to have like an executive session over it or something like that. So I do hear what you're saying though, and I don't want to challenge that at all. You're exactly right.
Yes, Member Hurd.
Thank you. So all of these positions are currently vacant, is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, so
I do think it's important to mention, what Member Harper just restated but asked last time, is I think the last meeting we had, there was a question about it, and I think the answer was factual, but it didn't capture that there is an adult working with these kids every day, even though it kind of looked unfilled because it wasn't filled by a sub. So there's a human capacity component to this, but I would say that at least 6 of them are in fact vacant and not being filled in the way that one at Montello is.
gotcha. So the fact that we're even talking about keeping positions that are currently unfilled with no known idea of when those positions will potentially be filled is mind-boggling to me. And I mean, Kirsten is probably, sorry, Jake, but literally like the smartest person in this room. So when she says that, sorry, but she never comes to us with things. She doesn't come to us and she doesn't give us things unless she has a reason or she thinks she has a way around it or she knows where she can figure it out or where she can find it or where she can get it. Like the woman like is the most out of the box thinking person that I've ever met. And so I don't even know why we're having a conversation about potentially putting positions in the budget that aren't actually filled, because why would we fund something that isn't currently filled? I guess I don't know.
Just real quick to clarify. So I'm looking at the list, all the list. I'm seeing 5, correct? There's Montello, Geiger, Connors, LMS, LHS. I think the 7 may have been referencing the special ed assistant principals, which we discussed separately.
Yes, that's my mistake. There are 5.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that. Yes, Member Bowden.
So I just want to clarify, by removing these positions that are not filled, absolutely nothing changes in the day-to-day in these classrooms. Director Crafts is shaking her head no. Is she allowed to come up and clarify what changes if we remove those positions?
I don't know about allowed. She certainly
Sorry,
can.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
She's the smartest person in the room, except for maybe a couple of us.
The 5 open resource room positions, nothing will change. The only thing it was in an effort to have all of the caseloads be more equal because some schools had higher ones than others. I think the school that it came up with had reached out because they had a ed tech pulling a group. So that's just teaching and you can teach. And there was a small stipend attached to that person for doing the long-term sub position. We can continue to do that, but their caseload numbers are so small that they don't need to there's not enough kids there getting, because they're well under 35.
Let's not, hold on. Let's not have.
thank you, Director Crafts.
Okay.
So let me just ask, because Member Jensen did have a request for staff. You still have that request, right?
No, I'll withdraw that. I wish I knew that earlier, though. No, I can withdraw that. But to be clear, I did make statements of things that I am willing to cut on. I'm willing to take a losing vote. I get it, guys. It's a majority vote wins, but I have made suggestions of things I'm willing to cut on. I'm willing to take a losing vote, and I'm also willing to compromise on other things. So I am trying to reduce the budget here. I'm trying. This is just a very unorganized process, at least for my mind. And I wonder how much the public is able to follow along with this.
Member Hawkins.
I just want to share where I'm coming from anecdotally with this. I drive a school bus. I have children trapped in a metal box with me for as much as a half an hour. And they do feel trapped. I will tell you, they feel trapped. I try to make it easy, but they feel trapped. Until recently, I didn't have a monitor. So one person monitoring 20 plus students in a moving metal box and other drivers. It was great. Notice the eyes. It was great. I now have a monitor. And the emotional and psychological toll that having a monitor has eased for me cannot be understated, overstated, that I can't proficiently put into words. He was out sick. Every single child, every single one of them, where is he? Is he okay? I hope that in the future, if we come to a place where we can add some of these positions back and actually fill them, we're willing to look into that. Because sometimes just having another adult around to go, she just said, makes a huge difference behavior-wise and outcome-wise. And it's like parents, we see it with our own kids. When mom and dad are both on the same page, it makes things a little bit easier. When mom and dad are at opposite ends, things get really gnarly really quickly. And that's really all I have to say is yes, these aren't filled now. We may find in a couple of years that we need to have these positions and find a way to fill them. I just hope we're open to that if that happens. Because you slam a door, sometimes you need to crack it back open or pop open a window. And I want us to be willing to do that.
Okay, other comments on this item? Yes, Member Harper.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that it sounds like I heard Dr. Kraft say we can move that person back in, or basically like the ed tech support could remain if we cut the position for the resource room. Is that, I'm seeing a Karen nod.
The ed tech position's not being reduced, so that person will still be there to support.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just say my own opinion on this is, again, that there are vacant positions. We're also adding about $5 million in Article 2 special education expense in this budget. It's just, I think if the team believes that this is a small area to reduce a bit of the cost, then I think we just need to take it. That's my opinion. Because we are spending a lot of money in this area. And that doesn't mean that these positions aren't also needed, or that it's easy for other staff to deal with their absence. But I think that's the situation, and that's my feeling on it. Okay, so any other comments before we do the straw poll? Okay, so a thumbs up in this case will be to keep as proposed the superintendent's reductions of the SC resource room teachers at Montello, Geiger, Connors, LMS, and LHS. So if you support those reductions, then please give a thumbs up. Okay. All right, I think, yes, Member Hurd.
Can we take a 5-minute recess? I'm gonna leave it. Or just let.
Yeah, you're welcome to take a break. Members just generally are welcome to do so as needed. We'll hold off on straw polling until everyone is available. Hopefully we can, move through this. So I think the next category, and this might be a stickier one to try to talk through, would be the student support positions. Would you mind describing those, Superintendent Lewis? So I would suggest, and this is one where I think we can only sensibly take together, But let me know if you disagree with that, Superintendent. But these are the positions like the Gen Ed social worker at Montello, Dean of Students at Montello, Family Engagement Coordinator at Montello. And that was, not exactly one-to-one, but that was discussed in relation to additions for student support specialist positions instead at the various elementary schools. So are you pulling up a document about that? Just superintendent is pulling up a document.
So we can work off of this document if it's easiest. We did last time talking about some category things, but just starting at the top, this would be the Gen Ed social worker at Montello, Dean of Students, Montello, Family Engagement Coordinator, Montello. Sliding down, you would see the SEL integration as family support person at Connors. I know I'm missing one.
Just a clarifying question for myself. Do you consider the duty aides as part of this, or is that really a separate category of position and work?
I had left them separate figuratively, but I think they're providing student supports, but it's more supervisory in a space versus clinical or hotspot or other problem solving level of interaction. So I did not include them. Student engagement specialist at the middle school.
Yes, is that part
Mhm.
too?
Yes. Sorry, it's skipping my page instead of letting me scroll. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll say it into the mic. So you said the student engagement specialist at LMS, so would that also be the student engagement resource room teacher at LMS and the resource room teacher at LHS?
That's
Is that
special
separate?
education.
That was special education that
Yeah.
we just did.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So as I look at this list, I think I've gotten them all.
Right. Yeah. Different acronym. Yeah. Do you mind just restating the list, just
Sure.
end to end, just to clarify?
Yep.
I apologize for the technical.
Sorry for the resizing, but as I scroll, it just skips the page, so I need to shrink it to see it a little better. So Gen Ed social worker Montello, Dean of Students Montello, Family Engagement Coordinator Montello, the integration is family staff at Connors. Student engagement specialist at the middle school. Those would be the items.
Thank you. So those 5 positions for reductions. Yes, member Glant, the member Hurd.
Yes, a couple, or last year, we were struggling with Montello. And I think things have improved quite a bit. So I would propose that we keep what we can at Montello. I would think that if we eliminated those positions specifically at Montello, we might be taking a big step backwards because of what what has happened in the past. So I would propose that we keep Montello just to keep Montello.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. So, 2 things. One, we had, or I think at some point, Jake, you had mentioned, again, not all schools have the same things or equal amounts. So, in, let's just say, taking away the dean of students at Montello, we have talked a little bit about the restructuring of the SEL's positions to potentially function in that way. So, there's that. The other concern I have about like the family engagement and those types of positions, we now have someone who's at our student resource center, and they have 2 ed techs there, but they are serving our entire district. And so I just want to make sure that in removing those positions, that is not going to potentially add more work than what our student resource staff is already doing. So I just want to make sure that we still have people in each of our schools that are going to, whether it's a pantry or a closet for clothes or those types of things. Like those types of things are still going to be available at each of our schools for our students to access, so that they don't have to, those things aren't put on solely on our student resource staff.
So the positions at the Student Resource Center are multifaceted. They're also helping with some of the truancy and chronic absenteeism and helping schools with checking in on that and doing all the pieces that are required by law to help with that. The schools that have these positions that you're discussing right now, the family engagement folks, are the people who do the majority of that type of work in the building. So what's happening with attendance, what's happening with supporting families with the things that they could get from the Student Resource Center. So they're definitely an arm of that. There's lots of other things that they do too. So I can't say that it's not going to add work to the folks at the resource center, though they already do a lot of the oversight. What it means is that in the schools, there's going to need to be, so if we're talking about the restructuring of the SEL coaches and some of those, that behavior specialist type of position, in some schools, that is probably really doable for someone to do all of the things that are already happening. In other schools, it might not be. But to your point of equity and thinking about schools that do and schools that don't, this was an effort to try to look at that and figure out a way to combine some of those things. So to Elizabeth's point earlier, these are, Jake's comment. This is really, I mean, all of these areas are tough, but this is definitely one where we could potentially feel that crunch with adding some things to other people's plates, including the folks at the Student Resource Center.
So just real quick before we continue the discussion, I think this one, maybe even more so than some of the others, it's tough to not talk about it in the context of some of the other additions that were discussed. So I might ask if the superintendent could pull up, you already have it up, the document he shared previously that looks at them kind of together as a chunk. So I think that might clarify a little bit. But Member Bowden, did you want to make a comment before that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say with these 5 positions, it's 5, right? Yeah. So with these 5, I think I would be more, I would want to save the gen ed social worker and the dean of students at Montello. And I think the 3 other positions, the student engagement specialist, I feel like that turns into the student support specialist, like wheelhouse, right? So I'm comfortable with removing those positions, but I do think that the social worker and the dean of students need to stick around at Montello.
Yeah, is that clear enough as an option to describe? And do you mind just describing what you pulled up here?
Yeah, sure. So we had shared this at a prior meeting as a resource. Please note that there's a couple things in here that are not relevant because of our conversation. The SEL coach positions, or you kind of disregard those on this sheet. But all of the other positions that we're talking about currently, this is that listing. It also tells you what's vacant, what's filled. And to Member Bowden's point, if you act on the addition of these student support folks that are dean-like, they would wear many hats. That student support piece is one of those hats as far as it relates to connected with Student Resource Center, truancy, that kind of effort, but also hotspots throughout the day. That said, if you choose to keep them, I would ask a clarifying question on Montello of, are you keeping the dean and looking to add the student support person? Because you feel that capacity is needed, which is totally fine. I just want to make sure that's clear when you do your go around.
So I saw some other hands. Yes, Member Harper?
Thank you. So similar to, I think it was, Member Gallant was talking about, Montello and the troubles that they had in the last year. And I think we've heard a lot from the community also about, these positions. And so I feel strongly that the dean and the student support specialist need to be in place. What I'm hearing is that I think that you already, the assistant superintendent described the role, but all of that sort of following up with kids who have not been in school for 3 days and making sure they can access the pantry and giving rides to parents who can't make it to IEP meetings and just all of that stuff that feels like it can't be, done by both the dean, basically it would be like the dean absorbing those roles if we cut the student support specialist. So I think I've heard enough about those 2 roles that it feels super, super important. As far as the other schools, I know Connors is also another really high need school. And I think what is being proposed is, I guess I know less about what's actually happening on the ground. So I just wanted to flag that, but also just say that it seems like, all of the elementary schools are facing cuts. And it does seem important that they have some sort of backbone support added back in, as we talked about for the hotspots and the helping with various roles. I think I know enough about what's going on at Montello that it feels really important not to cut the dean and the student support specialist I'm sorry, the family engagement coordinator. But I'm, open to other models that people or like the superintendent and the admin teams have proposed for the other schools. But again, also flagging that Connors may need more support. I also wanted to say, as far as, I think I really believe in social workers. I think it's very important. I also know that, yeah, there's other social workers, there's other schools that don't have social workers. And so I'm also cognizant of that, of wanting to add them back in. Montello would keep a social worker in the superintendent's proposal. And so there's one that would be proposed to be cut. And so as much as I don't know, I'm very happy to support keeping the social worker. But if push comes to shove, I would probably personally, when we talk about adding back in some of the grant funded positions, would be interested in prioritizing keeping one at the middle school and the high school. And I know Geiger also has one currently and probably also needs one. So it's tricky stuff.
Yes, Member Gallant.
I'm just going to reiterate where we were last year with Montello, that it was a hot spot. And I think if we can keep all 3 of those positions, I think we'll be in a better place. I think that if we lose anything from Montello, I think we're in a position to lose stability that seems to be going on there right now. I would suggest that Connors and LMS would be the ones that we would keep, the ones that we would make cuts to. Thank you.
Member Bowden.
I just want to ask a clarifying question to Member Harper and Member Glant. So the student support specialist is the new added position, okay? And so I'm wondering if you want to keep the social worker, the dean of students, and the family engagement coordinator, do you also want to add a student support? Because what I suggested, and I don't know if this is what you were like thinking, is that I wanted to keep the social worker and the dean of students, remove the family engagement coordinator, but add the student support specialist. I just wanted to clarify that. So I am in favor of adding the student support specialist to the 5 elementary schools and his additions part. But I'm just saying, I think the family engagement coordinator at Montello could go if we're adding that on, as well as the student engagement specialist at LMS and the one at Connors as well. So that's what I was suggesting. I just want to make sure that's clear. Okay.
I wasn't aware of that, or I forgot that there was going to be a SEL there. Yeah, I'm okay with that, keeping the social worker and the dean of students if we are able to have that SEL in there.
Great.
Is that correct?
The specialist, the SEL is coming out and they're creating those 5 positions.
Gotcha.
Member Heard.
Yeah, so I agree. I am okay with taking out the family engagement coordinator, those types of positions. Again, I would like to see the dean of students and the social worker at Montello stay, because again, I feel like we're in a, I don't know if the word is happy place, but I would say we were in a happy place right now, stable, something. And so I don't want to remove and then have to try and scramble, because I feel like when last year we were kind of in that fight or flight, like we're pulling people from Dingley, we're pulling people from other schools, we're trying to patch. It's like a sinking boat. We're trying to patch holes here. And so I'd rather not go back to that model. And so again, I would be in favor of keeping the social worker and the dean of students.
Okay. And I want to acknowledge that this one we're pretty in the weeds with, and I think the reality is we've just gotten, I think probably we all have decently strong feelings about this, given some of the history, as well as I certainly have gotten by far the most comments about this topic. I think for good reason. So I think it's worth spending a bit of time on it. I guess I'll give my own opinion, which I did share last time, and I still kind of feel, which I'd rather just not do any of this restructuring this year, because my broader opinion is that we really need to look at redistricting our elementary schools anyways, and to do all this and then switch around the student body. I know it's a much bigger issue, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. That said, perhaps the most practical thing to do at this point would be, as I understand what Member Bowden has suggested, which is just to go through with adding the student support specialist positions, and go through with the reductions of the SEL integrationist and family at Connors, as well as the student engagement specialist at LMS, but retaining the social worker and the dean. So basically replacing the family engagement coordinator with that student support specialist position. So I can get behind that. One question I do have though, is there also, under the addition list, there's 2, maybe it'd be helpful to scroll down actually. There's also the addition of 2 school counselors that was kind of discussed in this broader category. And I wasn't sure what the committee's view on that was at this point. Now, maybe I was looking at it earlier. School counselor Geiger, school counselor Connors. Do you want to speak to that real quick and then?
Sure, I can go quite in depth with that if you'd like, but the 10,000-foot view is when we look at the resources available to some of these other schools and their numbers of students and their demographics, Connors and Geiger are short. is it in comparison to other schools when you look at ratios and their demographics or what have you. So this pitch in reducing all those other roles was to, again, I know you're not a huge fan of the restructure fees, but that would put better equity of supports at each of those two schools.
So I just want to,
And hold on, Carrie, one sec.
So I want to just add, because we've talked about the sunsetting grant positions. So those two positions, the counselor, it's a social worker at Geiger and a school counselor at Connors, those are sunsetting positions. And so looking at as Jake said, taking some of the positions and reallocating them so that we could preserve at least those two.
so I just want to elevate that a bit just to make sure we're all on the same page about what is being proposed and to clarify if that is, what members think about those positions as well, since we've mostly just discussed the student support specialists. So Member Glant.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what a school counselor is. What's the professional? Are they a licensed professional or what is a school counselor?
You might have known them as guidance counselors, but now the name for them is school counselors.
And back 100 years ago, when I was in school, we didn't have good guidance counselors until I was in high school. So now they're in the elementary. Guidance counselors with me was preparing for college. Where are you going to go? What do you want to do after high school? What do they do?
So it's another student support, so it's a support for students that it's similar to some of the other roles, but there is a licensed component, a certification for a guidance counselor at elementary level. They may work with a whole class by doing lessons around manners and friendship and those types of things. They also might do small groups of kids that just need somebody to process something, having an issue with a friend. It's not somebody who's necessarily involved with students when there is a huge crisis, but they might be. It might be a student who has a family that's parents that have separated, and so they just need someone to talk to. It's less of a clinical role, I guess, and then more of a.
So it's not a therapeutic, unlike a social worker, they are a therapeutic, whereas a counselor is more like, I don't know.
I do think there are therapeutic components to their role, but I wouldn't say that they're all LCSWs, if you will.
Okay, Member Hurd.
Thank you. So I can just say when my children were at McMahon, my son would go and see Mr. Jack, who is amazing, and they would talk about sports cards and it was just kind of someone for him to check in with. He also, being a boy, there's not a lot of male teachers in elementary schools. And so for him to have someone to go to just kind of hang was good, beneficial for him. They also do a lot of, like Karen said, personal bubble, and this is where your safe space is, and those types of things. So I feel like they wear a lot of hats, but I feel like yeah. Does that explain?
Member Harper. Sorry, were you finished? Oh, you had a follow-up? Member.
So the counselor would be replacing a social worker? Or is that in addition to?
So in this sample, just to keep it narrow, these are folks who are doing very similar work. These positions are sunsetting because they're based on a grant, and we'd like to be able to continue that capacity at those two schools.
Okay.
Member Harper, you got a hand up?
Thank you. I feel like I'm taking us in a different direction, but I guess to summarize what I think I just heard is that there's the superintendent's proposal, which includes adding back. This is tricky because we're talking about a lot of different roles. Yeah, and both the current positions and add. So we may need to break things up a little bit, but yeah, that two of the grant funded positions the superintendent is proposing to add back in at Geiger and Connors, which are school counselor roles, not social workers. But maybe could be social workers. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think there's a level of this of if the resources were available, I would then be able to share with principals and their teams. You have this resource. This is the intent of that role. How does it best fit your school? And hopefully they can hire from there.
Okay, great. And we are not currently discussing the other two, or like there's more, but particularly I'm interested in the grant funded social worker at the high school and the middle school. That's not part of this, right?
Let's take that as a separate item, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. Okay, so I think if we could go back to this proposition, or like we were discussing at Montello, Member Bowden's proposal to basically keep the social worker, the dean, and then swap out the family engagement coordinator with the student support specialist. I just wanted to say that my understanding is that the student support specialist is kind of like a dean and that role into one. And it sounds like the person who, and we can't discuss people, so maybe I'll take that back. But it sounds like it's working well at Montello, the current configuration of things. So I was just wondering, I guess I would propose maybe keeping things as they are at Montello, but then adding the other student support specialists at the other schools as is proposed.
I might suggest, just to start, that we do a quick thumbs up for the superintendent's original budget proposal around these items, just to clarify, which, to be honest, I'm not sensing that there's going to be a lot of thumbs up, but I think just to do our due diligence, right? So again, that would require reducing the gen ed social worker at Montello, dean of students at Montello, family engagement coordinator at Montello, SEL integrationist at Connors, and the student engagement specialist at LMS, and adding the student support specialist across the elementary schools, as well as a school counselor at Geiger and Connors. So that was the original proposal in the superintendent's budget. So any thumbs up for that proposal? Okay, great. So moving on then, Member Bowden, I think, had suggested an approach instead. I think Member Harper, maybe you just made some potential alternative. I don't know if Member Bowden, you agree with that, or if you'd like to speak to that.
In theory, yes, I agree with you, but just for budget purposes, no, I would like to see if there's support for allowing the student support specialist to replace the family engagement coordinator or take on that role. I think if I'm being honest, I think we could actually eliminate the dean too with this role, but I would like to see the dean stay because of how it's working. And so I just feel like, I don't know, like I said, just in the spirit of trying to compromise here, I think that if we have to make a cut at Montello, then that would be the only cut that I'd be willing to make, because it sounds like the student support specialist would be able to take that role over.
Yep. And just to clarify, yeah, and it's not a huge difference, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let me restate what I understand to be the proposal here, which would be to leave the gen ed social worker at Montello and dean of students at Montello positions as is, to reduce the family engagement coordinator position at Montello, the SEL integrationist at Connors, and the student engagement specialist at LMS. And let's just take it all together to add the full list here around 5 student support specialists and 2 school counselors. Is that the proposal? Okay, so thumbs up for that suggestion. Okay. All right, I'm seeing 6 thumbs in that case. Okay, any comments on that? Yeah, sorry, that's a weird way to phrase it, but just any comments on this category before we move on? Okay, seeing none. There are, I'm seeing 5 other positions that we have not yet discussed under the reductions category. I think we can hopefully, yes, duty aids is one, so that's the duty aid at Connors and the duty aid at Farwell. Is there anything you'd like to add about that?
I believe one of them is vacant. And Principal Bard, is yours vacant or is yours filled? Do you want to speak to it briefly, just so folks have a good context for what that person does, at least for you? Thank you.
So our duty person does a wide variety of tasks between supervision in the cafeteria, playground. She also supports in the office. I only have one secretary at my school, so she helps out in the morning with tardy students. She's out in the morning and the afternoon directing traffic and so forth.
Thank you. Any comment? Yes, Member Bowden.
Is this another hat that the student support specialist would wear?
I think principals would find a way to task that activity if they have that position.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so I'd suggest that we do a thumbs up for those who are supportive of the proposed reduction of the duty aid at Connors and the duty aid at Farwell. Okay, see, I'm sorry, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay, 6. Just any other comments on the subject that was a majority in that? Oh, are you raising your hand? Yes, Member Hawkins.
I just want to say for Principal Bard, I will pray for your ability to fill the hole that this will lead. Because if you've ever been by Farwell at release time, you know how important people directing traffic is.
Okay, any other comments? I do want to be clear, these are just straw polls. If there's other ideas, can always take them. Yes, Member Harper.
Sorry, I just want to say how painful it is because I know it's an important role. You need that. You need someone to be out there so that teachers can go to the bathroom instead of being out. And yeah, so this is a very painful process. I just want to say that.
I appreciate that, Member Harper. It does feel it's tough to do this. It can feel a little yeah, it's tough. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, Member Heard.
Thank you. So again, I do know this is tough and hard, and especially when we're talking about staff and people in our district. But I would like to, when we talk about our goals at some point, discuss how we get the public involved. I know when I used to, when my kiddos were at McMahon to get the prime parking spot on the side of the road, I would show up 30 to 40 minutes before dismissal. I would absolutely go out and direct traffic and do whatever I needed to do to help out. And I know Charlotte does a great job and she holds her sign in her little walkie-talkie, but I feel like those are important things that those are ways that we can help out as parents. And so when we talk about goals, I would love to see something along that lines.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so just the other positions on the list before we get into other things not on the list. I'm seeing the ed tech at Next Step, ed tech at LRTC, and the math tech contracted for LRTC. Is there anything you would like to add about those?
These were, again, no easy positions, but these are positions in that one contract that we feel we can overcome and look for another way with the contract with a math teacher at the high school, potentially.
Any comments on this set of positions? Yeah,
Sure. It's the ed tech and Next Step and ed tech in one of the LRTC programs and the $20,000 contract that we had last year for math and CTE efforts.
Yeah, I apologize for reading those a little quickly, and it's not to undervalue what we're discussing here. But yeah, are there any comments on these positions or? Okay, so just a thumbs up if you are okay with the 3 reductions as proposed. Okay. Any other comments on that group? Okay.
Um,
Oh, I'm sorry.
This
Member
just
Eaps.
seems like a place where we trust the team.
Yes, I agree with that. Okay, so there are a couple of items that I had noted down that don't necessarily involve positions listed. So one, Member Harper raised around just any other grant-funded social work positions. We did just allude to a couple of them. I guess, do you want to just address that first, and then we can continue?
Give me just a second.
Okay. Sorry, were you? Okay, Member Bowden and then Member Hurd.
Sorry, so I'm looking at, maybe I'm not seeing it, or maybe I feel like we talked about this last time, that 7 to 12 literacy specialist at Dingley. Is that on our list somewhere? I'm just not seeing it, so.
Yeah, it didn't make that same list, but it is in fact in there with the shift to multi-tiered systems of support. So
Okay.
Adam actually picked up on that. So that was my mistake.
Okay, so that is a reduction and it's part of your Dingley list, but it's not on the Dingley administrative cuts.
It would add to the math, but yes, it's on the cuts.
So in the math, it's there, it's just not.
It's not in the math. I got
Oh.
it. So that would actually grow. That reduction would grow.
Okay, thank you.
And then if you look at this listing, you can see the grant funded positions that are sunsetting. I highlighted that little cube there. The two in green are the ones that you, at least conceptually, were willing to entertain having from the other conversation here just a minute ago. The three in red are unaddressed, elementary, right? And the two in the middle.
So the three in the red are what we've reduced in order to then have the restructure. So the two that are still not in a budget or have not been discussed are the middle school and the high school social worker.
Yes, Member Hurd.
Thank you. Can you tell us who and where we have social workers in our district? Like where? Like, yes, no, maybe?
We can, I'm looking over here. Charlotte, do you have a social worker? Nothing at McMahon, nothing at Farwell. Grant funded one position at Geiger, nothing at Connors. Montello has two. Middle school has two, but one is grant funded. John, you have one grant funded, I believe. We might be missing. Rob doesn't have any. Jen doesn't have any.
Okay, so we have some some elementaries with none. We have the middle school with two, but one's grant funded. And the only one at the high school is the one that's grant funded.
That's correct.
And Montello has two.
Montello has two. Yeah.
Okay, so I personally would be okay with putting in the one at the high school, but not the one at the middle school where they already have one. Is kind of where I'm at. I'm also wondering those other elementary schools that don't have any, who or what provides that social work type duties that's done like at Montello or the middle school or the high school or wherever.
They don't. They don't have anyone. And unless there's a grant, which we constantly seek, but they don't. Connors does have an interventionist that they kind of multitask with. They're not a clinician, they're not a social worker. They do great work, but really, it's schools doing the very best they can with what they have. There is a grant funded position, as I said, at Geiger, and we start looking at numbers, and you're talking ratios of 1 to 700 plus.
Member
Sorry,
Glenn.
in that, just one quick thing, in that list, did you say Connors has social worker?
Connors does not have a social worker.
So our only
they-
elementary school that has social workers is Montello and Geiger. Montello has two, Geiger has one grant funded, yes? That they're
Yes.
keeping.
Montello has two that are in the general fund. Except, well, if we go with
Yeah.
what you just did, Geiger has, the only one they have is sunsetting. It's on this list, but I think you just made a provision for that by way of the counselor
Yeah.
or whatever we call it. If you did something with middle and high school specifically, the middle school, well, if you do nothing, middle school will have one, the high school will have no one. And it would remain that Farwell would not have a social worker.
Okay, so Member Glant and then Member Bowden.
Just to put this in perspective, the city of Lewiston, the city Portland School Department has 31 social workers in their school system. And we are not that far behind as far as our population. So that's just something to think about.
Member Bowden.
So is there just not a school counselor needed at Farwell? I'm just trying to wrap my head around if Geiger has the student support specialist that we're giving them, they have a social worker. Why are they also getting a school counselor if Farwell and McMahon have none?
Well, in my proposed additions with the other subtractions, there was an effort there to try to spread some resource across our schools. Still underfunded, but again, if you have this much resource, how do we best use it given our complete demographics and number of buildings? Karen, can you add to it though?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember so we have school counselors and we have social workers. So we have some schools that just have a school counselor, like Farwell. They have a counselor, school counselor, one, but no social worker. There are others. This might make it, we do contract with Spurwink. So in terms of social workers, there are other opportunities for kids to see social workers, but it's through Spurwink, which requires lots of requirements to be met. So that's why we call these sort of like general ed social workers that can sort of work with, I mean, they can work with special ed kids, they can work with others too, but it's a little more free in terms of who they can work with and who they can support. So they do have counselors. The schools all have school counselors or guidance counselors. It's the social worker piece that is needed, but they don't all have the social workers.
So just to follow up then. So the reason we're giving Connors and Geiger a school counselor is because they don't currently have one or they need a second one?
So actually Geiger is getting a social worker. They have two counselors and they're getting a social worker. It may say counselor on that list, but they're actually in the grant, it's a social worker. So we would be, what you just discussed is keeping the school general ed social worker at Geiger. So they would have two school counselors and one social worker.
Okay.
At the middle school, they would have the one social worker. Amanda, you have a school counselor position as well, correct? And then the social worker, so two social workers and a school counselor. Farwell's keeping they have a school counselor. Yes. And then at Connors, they would only have one school counselor and no social workers if we didn't add this school counselor position that wasn't a
Then they
grant.
have two.
So they'll have two school counselors and no general ed social workers.
And McMahon already has a school counselor.
Yes,
They have two.
yeah, and
Okay.
no social work.
Great. Thank you.
Member Hurd.
So, not to backpedal here a little bit, but I'm gonna backpedal for a quick second because I feel like in the conversation about Montello, Dean, Montello, social worker, I should have asked that question at that point, like who has what? Um, and so personally, I would, again, because we're not talking about people, but I would rather have that designated position at Montello of the gen ed social worker to be a elementary social worker who would go to some of our schools who don't have a social worker, who only have one school counselor, who only, you know what I mean? I feel like, and I don't know, again, I'm not trying to backpedal here and I don't want to revisit something that we've already voted on, but I just feel like we've heard, and I don't know if the rest of you have, but I personally have heard from a lot of staff in our district about inequity, some having some having none, and it's concerning. And I know different schools have different demographics and some needs are higher in other schools than others, but
I think when we bring this back to you, we'll bring it back clean so you can see it. But also I would say, if you did what is in green up there and you considered the middle and high school as a group, while knowing that the student support positions, if implemented, we are getting better with equity while still maintaining supports at Montello. It's better. It's not perfect, but it's better.
Okay, so I think the specific thing that we might be talking about just for now is there appetite on the committee to support a social worker at LMS and or LHS out of the general fund budget? Am I correct? Member Harper, you brought this up, and is that right? Okay. Any other comments from committee members on that suggestion? And yeah, Member Bowden and then Member Eames.
Just to clarify, that's currently not in anything that we have, right?
Correct. Correct.
And what sort of additional cost would that be?
Sorry, I had to pause. Correct. These are not additions. These are grant funded positions that are sunsetting. And as far as a generic cost, this is that we would use that 80,457. I think the number is off the top of my head. So, yes, it'd be per position, right? They're doing quick math on us. High school and middle school.
Yeah, Member Bowden.
As far as support goes at the high school, they have a lot of counselors at the high school, right? We have a lot of school counselors there.
Principal Radke, how many counselors do you have? I think it's 5, but it's school counselors. Maybe it's 6. 6 school counselors at the high school.
All right, so there's 6 school counselors at the high school. You have a dean of students at the high school. You have 4 assistant principals at the high school, and that's not including special ed assistant principals. That's just
John, do you mind just coming up to the
2 deans. I'm just trying to get a feel for what the high school has for support right now. And if Mr. Radke thinks there is a need to keep this social worker at the high school.
So the short answer is absolutely need to keep the social worker. She is sort of our general purpose, excuse me, that position is very general purpose, spends a lot of time mediating conflict. School counselors do that as well, but they are also charged with helping kids map their way through college admissions process, et cetera. So this position is crucial because it's not tied to special education. It's not tied to an outside billing agency like Spurwink. It is somebody we can say, here's a challenge that's come up, or that kids can seek out, when they're struggling, and they can work with anybody who walks through the door.
So one more quick follow-up then. Superintendent Langlois, when I mentioned the idea of selling 287 Main Street, at the next meeting, you came back and found some grants to fund 287 Main Street. Is there a way to find a grant to fund this social worker?
I wrote a grant proposing funding. I haven't received that funding, and we'll continue to push that effort. But we are continuing to write grants for social work and student services related things. There's not a lot of grants out there right now in that specific vein. A lot of them are drying up because of the pausing of the ease and that kind of funding. But to answer one of your first questions, Karen put it up there, it'd be 162,000 estimated for both of those positions to be in the budget. That would be an add that's not in there. And do you feel like you had your question answered about deans and administrators and what? That's okay.
Okay, so I think member Eames had a hand up.
My question was about whether we were talking about just the high school or whether we were talking about both. So far, I think we're still talking about both, but I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Yes. Member Harper.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate the high school is our largest school and there's what, like 1,500 about students there. So having more additional support makes a lot of sense. And especially, again, I say this and it always pains me to say it out loud, but yeah, in a community that has gun violence and has suffered a lot in that realm, I think taking, even though this is an ad, these are folks who really support students through some really serious, challenging stuff. And I think that these kind of mental health supports are a really important investment in school safety. So I also, yeah, I don't love the fact that they weren't represented anywhere, and that it feels like an ad back in, but it feels to me pretty critical. And I hope voters would recognize the importance of that. Yeah, clinical level supports and not sort of just the sort of SEL level, but like abuse, neglect, like really tough stuff.
Okay, well, did you have a hand up, Member Hawkins? And then we'll go down the line.
If you see me pulling on my hair and twitching a lot, it hits really close to home for me. So I'm trying not to get too into it. Counselor played a very important role in turning my life a different direction. I'm really glad to hear us talking about this, especially at the high school and middle school. Elementary school is one thing. When you hit middle school, you go from being a kid to not being a teenager to being a what the heck am I? And things can go really sideways really quick there. And having the support as they make that transition and then transition into high school, I know it's a big ask for our community, but it can be really vital to helping head off some of the issues we're dealing with now because supports hadn't been there in the strength we actually needed them. I know people are going to push back. $160,000 is a lot of money. There are a lot of people in our community that would change their entire trajectory of their life. We're trying to help the entire trajectory of our students, the future of our community. That's why I'm speaking up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Member Hurd.
Thank you. I just, what is at the middle school right now? So they have one current, right? And how many counselors?
2 counselors, 2 social workers. Currently, one of them is in a grant.
Correct, funded and deans?
Yes, 2 deans.
Two deans, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I agree, like, middle school is a weird, yeah, like, kids, you're just weird in middle school. And so, yeah, I'm fine with it. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Member Glenn.
As a LCSW, I have heard in different veins, well, if kids need a social worker, then they should get one outside of school. Well, I have to tell you that there is a shortage of LCSWs that see adolescents and see elementary school. That's a particular part of LCSW that a lot of people do not go into. So there is a shortage. So if we can get them here, if they're here, I say we keep them.
Okay, should we go ahead and just do a straw poll? Any other comments before we do that? So the proposal is to add to the budget a social worker position at Lewiston Middle School and a social worker position at Lewiston High School. So thumbs up if you would like to do that. Okay, that is a majority. So yeah, that's it for that item. So what I have on my list, let's see, I think there's one more I have written down, which was and I might ask Member Jensen to say more about this, about the teaching and learning division, particularly around, again, forgive me if you might have a clearer way to describe this than I wrote down, but just the middle positions in that division between the coaches and I think the director. So would you mind saying a word on that?
Yeah, I just think the instructional coaches can report directly to the top level administration, and the levels between are something that we really should consider cutting.
Okay, I know this is a bit on the fly. Do you have those position lists available just in terms of what those positions are?
So this would be talking about the specialists, I believe. And so we have a literacy specialist. So what's left in that group that you haven't discussed is a literacy specialist and a math specialist, and the potential for an MTSS person transitioning. That's all that's left. What's already been considered for reduction is a literacy specialist. The technology specialists have already been considered for reduction. So you're down to essentially two folks who would specialize in the areas of literacy and math that would guide the coaches with best practices, with strategies for teaching and learning, organizing and helping facilitate and carry out professional development, curriculum, organization and teaching, so that folks can adapt to any curriculum changes or adjustments, and other tasks. I don't know if you want to add to that. So that's what those two roles are.
Okay, yeah, Member Eames.
So then you mentioned the MTS is the multi-tiered, whatever. Are you saying where does that fit in? So you've got the two people and then
Sure.
the MTSS, whatever.
Yeah, so we had a vacant literacy specialist position. And the administration felt strongly that we really need to have some additional resource to coordinate district-wide multi-tier system of support, which are required by law. We don't have that person or that organization right now. And so that was the ask. That was one of the additions that we put in, was to reduce by the literacy component, but add the MTSS. That was strongly supported by administrative team.
Okay, so Member Jensen, is there any more information you'd like about that, or would you like the group to consider reducing? So just to restate that I'm understanding, 3 specialist positions, is that correct? MTSS, literacy, or sorry, yeah, literacy and math. Those are currently funded, not in as
Those-
the list we currently have, but
Given the work that's happened, that's what's left in the budget. It would be
Okay.
those 3 roles, yes.
so reducing those 3 positions, is that the proposal?
So that the coaches report directly to the top level administration, and anyone in between is cut. Yes, that's what I'm asking for.
Okay. Were you going to add something?
Make.
Okay. Any comments from committee members? Any questions about that suggestion? Member Harper?
Thank you. I wonder if, because I think our challenge is obviously just funding, and I wonder if it would make sense to make an alternative proposal around like a number for this particular one of like finding, rather than like suggesting which specific positions to cut, but just saying like if it's a restructuring of the coach and admin of the coaches, that it would be like again, I don't like to, numbers feel arbitrary, but like if I had that in front of me, I might be able to say like the equivalent of like, one position or two positions or something like that. I know I'm saying positions again, but like whatever the sort of, like if it's $200,000 or something like that. It's not a fully fleshed out idea, but I think maybe, am I making some sense?
Giving them a number and.
Member Eames, do you want to?
Sorry. Suggesting a number, 100K or 200K to cut, and then let them figure out how and where in that middle level admin position that money could be found. So I guess coming back at next meeting with some information on that would be what we need, unless it can be done now.
Member Heard.
Thank you. So if we're thinking of Lewiston Public Schools as a business, our number one job is to educate students. And so I feel like removing those positions is not doing our job. So I understand the need for reductions, and we obviously want to get the budget passed, but I don't think that, personally, I don't think that is the way that we, get that number down, is by reducing the people who are helping our students to learn and to roll out curriculum and those types of things. So I wish Sue was here, because I'm sure she would probably have lots to say about that. But maybe next meeting.
Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, that just to respond to Member Hurd's comments, the coaches would largely fill that role. I mean, we hire them to the experts. They've been teaching a long time. They really know what they're doing. I think they can absolutely fill that role. I'm trying to work with you guys and make cuts here. So to me, even from teaching last year in the district, I feel like this is something that's not going to impact teaching negatively. As long as we allow the coaches to be better utilized, then that need is going to be fine. We don't need coaches for the coaches, essentially. So I think that we can restructure things in a way that we don't miss out on, that we don't lose academic progress. So I do get the concern, though. I do want to validate that. I completely get that. I think just if we examine it a little bit closely, I think we can absolutely do what we need to do. Have the instructional coaches at the school level perform the trainings that we need to have happen, the professional development. So I just, from my experience, it's not going to have a negative impact, in my opinion. I would prefer to keep them. I do want to make that clear. But if we have to make cuts, to me, this is the direction I think we should go, in my professional experience.
Yeah, Member Heard.
Thank you. So I think in past committees, we've talked about like coaches and, in your logic, you're saying you don't need coaches for coaches, but then the same logic would be, we don't need coaches to teach teachers how to teach when they potentially got a teaching degree from a university. So I think, again, just my own personal opinion, but I think if we're keeping our coaches, which it sounds like we are, because we've come to the realization that we need them, then I think we need to be able to provide them with the best resources to be able to coach our teachers. And in order to do that, I feel like these are those people.
Okay, so just to clarify, I think we can do the thumbs up on that, your original suggestion of those three positions. And maybe if you or others are interested, we could follow up depending on how that goes with a number, if the committee's interested. So the positions are an MTS, a multi-tier system of support specialist, literacy specialist, and a math specialist. Is that correct? Okay. Is that clear? Yeah, remember, do you have a dollar amount available? If not,
It would be probably 300,000, upwards of $300,000.
okay, so roughly $300,000. Is that sufficient information for you? Okay, yes, Member Harper.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious if Member Jensen would support a friendly amendment to that of sort of looking to find like between 1 and 200,000 of cuts in the slash restructuring of, rather than like, you know, saying this position, that position, just for consideration.
Member Jensen, would you like to respond?
I would, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear where you're coming from, but I'm at the point where we need to make cuts, and this is something I don't think it's not student facing. Our coaches are experts, they're more than capable of doing what they need to do to fill the role that we need done. And so I understand the urge to compromise, but if we're looking at any kind of cuts to be made, some cuts we've kind of done our straw poll to vote on, I think are going to affect students directly. This is not one that would. So I just don't agree with kind of finding a middle ground on that, and I do apologize. So I do stick with my original, but I appreciate the offer at least.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just, if you do support removing those 3 positions, please give a thumbs up. Okay, I see 2. So I don't see a majority for that suggestion, at least at this meeting. Would you like to follow up with the other suggestion? Okay, Member Harper.
Yeah, so just, I guess, would propose to find, asking the admin team to find between $100,000 and $200,000 worth of savings in looking at, potentially restructuring coaches in the Office of Teaching and Learning.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think that's clear enough. So please show a thumbs up if you support that proposal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Okay, so is that a clear enough directive for you, Superintendent? Okay. So that is all of the parking lot items I had on my list. I think the Assistant Superintendent was keeping track. Is there anything else? Okay, anything else? I know some members had mentioned, yeah, Member Glant.
Just when our next meeting will be.
Yeah, well, let me say a word about what I think could happen next. So we should meet next week. I think that is basically required, if I'm understanding the schedule correctly. It is a school break. That is, yes, it is a school break, but we do need to meet to try to meet the timeline. So as usual, I think it'd be best if we just follow up over email for the scheduling, so that's easier than doing it live generally. I think in terms of what we do at that meeting, we should arrive at a vote at that point. We'll notice it as a regular meeting. And I think what I would find helpful, and other members please chime in, but would be one to write up everything we just discussed in the categories we discussed it, because we were all kind of piecing them together in categories just because the committee seemed interested in getting into that level of detail. So I think piecing it together by those categories so we can confirm what we just discussed, as well as the final total impact that has on the local ask and the budget overall, and have a motion and a vote on a final budget proposal to send to the city council. So certainly room for further discussion, and I'm sure there will be more. There will also be more opportunity for public comment. And yeah, in terms of location, I think we just need to follow up depending on the exact date. Any comments on the logistics before we also check if there's any other substantive topics? Yes.
Just one that Monday is a holiday, so.
Yeah, it won't be Monday.
I would avoid Monday.
Good point.
Do you meet Tuesday next week? You do. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it should be Monday or Tuesday next week, it sounds like. I see Member Bowden and then Councilor Harriman.
This isn't about the further scheduling of a meeting. I just wanted to close with something sorry, do you want me to wait?
Well, if it's, yeah, I guess if you want to close with something, let's wait.
Okay.
Councilor Harriman, did you have something on the?
It's around the sort of the city budget process and the revaluation conversation. If this is a good time for that.
Sure. Yeah, and then we can go back to you, Member Bowden. Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, I emailed you all, but the one update on the revaluation process is that the total value of all the property in the city came in higher than initially expected. So it's around 5 billion instead of 4.4 billion. So that means the proposed new mill rate can drop by about $2 to around it would be around 1762. The other thing is that there's some support on the council for phasing in the revaluation. I mentioned in that email that there's a cost to that because of, because the software has to be updated and changed to accommodate that. The estimate from the city was between 50,000 and 400,000 to do that. So trying to narrow that down to a more solid number. And then the third thing is that we have a budget workshop tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. at City Hall, and the Chief Assessor, Bill Healy, will be presenting on sort of on what the options are around phasing that in and other questions around the revaluation. So if anyone's interested, feel free to come to the meeting, watch it on YouTube. And then we also have a regular City Council meeting next Tuesday with a budget workshop before it at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you for that update. Member Bowden, did you want to? Sure.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly say, just for the public, because going into this meeting, we talked a lot about social workers tonight, and we gave thumbs up on adding social workers that weren't even in budget discussions before. And I feel like maybe the general public might grumble about this, these additional costs, but I do want to say that I had a moment where I was taken aback this week, where maybe I wouldn't have voted for this normally, but and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but my, we had a mass shooting in this city just 3 years ago. And 3 years ago still impacts every student in this district. And my own daughter, who is a sophomore in college, wrote an essay this week and sent it to me. And I'm going to cry if I read it. But it literally is about the shooting and the impact it's had on her life. And she was on vacation in Florida when it happened. And the impact on her life right now with that shooting is still dramatic enough for her to write an essay about it and how she felt and how she continues to feel to this day about something of that magnitude happening a mile from her home. So I'm not going to go any further into it. But I will say that I think it's important, and I really hope that the taxpayers in the city see the importance in that as well. That's what I wanted to end it on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so are there any other topics, items, information that committee members need between now and our next meeting? Any other suggestions that weren't considered or discussed tonight? Okay, Member Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just noticed on the meeting schedule, we didn't have a second regular meeting scheduled for May. I don't know if that was just something we accidentally left off or if we needed to add that. I believe one of our policies might, it might be optional actually. I just didn't know because we only have 3 more regular meetings after this. Well, with the additional one, we'll have 4 before the next school year, according to the schedule. So I didn't know if that was something we needed to add it or not.
Yeah, thanks for identifying that. I think we should have 2 in May, but we'll follow up about the correct schedule. Okay. If there are no other items for consideration or discussion, then we will conclude the meeting. And again, this is a workshop. We will treat it like a workshop properly, and the meeting is over. No vote necessary. Have a good night.